Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the Moore County Board of Education work session for Monday, February 4th. Is there an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And
Please stand
well.
for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
please join me in observing a moment of silence. Thank you. Before we get started, I just want to point out that we have a couple of our students in the audience from Pinehurst Elementary, some of our youngest students, and we're happy to have them here today to be listening to some important information that's going to be potentially impacting them. So, Dr. Grimacy.
And we're glad they brought their mom.
Yes, PTA President Emily Richardson. Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair, it is my privilege to introduce Mr. Locklear, and he will introduce other members of his entourage. I can introduce them too, but I don't want to mess him up.
That's okay.
In fact, I think the board, except for Ms. Thompson, the board is very familiar with these individuals, and she will get to know them.
Yes, you will. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Board. As Dr. Grimacy noted, I have some friends with me today. We're here today to review the framework moving forward for the second phase of student assignment here in Moore County. And with me today to be part of this presentation is our consulting partners from Numerex, Laura Evans and Mike Miller. And they'll jump in at different points in the presentation. But as you recall, in December 2018, you endorsed the student assignment plan for Meadeeds Creek Elementary, the new Meadeeds Creek Elementary, that primarily was looking at reducing crowding at two of our elementary schools, Vast Lakeview and Sandhills Farm Life Elementary. And so that plan focused primarily on reducing crowding at those two schools. And we also noted as we worked through the process that took us through the summer and fall of 2018, that there was additional work that would need to be done as we looked at opening of 3 additional elementary schools with 800 student capacities throughout and looking at the entire district. There would be additional work that we would need to be looking at. We need to be prioritizing as we move forward in this second phase of the student assignment plan. And so today, we would like to review some key data points with you that frame our work, that ground our process as staff begins working with Numerex and working with our community to develop a draft of the student assignment plan, multi-year student assignment plan moving forward. That includes Area 1, where we have some unfinished business that we need to look at in Area 1 as we move forward. It also includes Area 2, where we're seeing an enrollment decrease, and we want to look at that and share that information with you. And also we want to look at Area 3 and share the data there that grounds us moving forward. It really shows us we have a balance challenge and a capacity challenge in Area 3. They want to share some data that grounds our process with that. But as we did with the first step of our student assignment plan with Meadeeds Creek, our process was driven through the guiding principles that you developed to drive that process. And so Laura's here to take us through the process that we used with you and the community to develop those guiding principles that you endorsed in July, that staff will use to drive through this process. And then lastly, we'd like to share with you the proposed timeline and process that we'd like to use for this second phase of student assignment. So as I walk through, and as Laura walks through, and Mike, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please stop us and ask us as we walk through. So the first, there you go. The first area that we'd like to share with you is Area 1. And to do that, I like to use the map. And you have bullets on the previous slide that will walk through the points that I'll make. But as we may have heard Dr. Grimacy use this strategy, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to look at the map as we're looking at the unfinished business that we have to look at in this second step of the student assignment process. If you look at the yellow portion of the map, that represents the new student assignment area that you endorsed from Deeds Creek Elementary. And that, again, the primary reason for that area was to pull overcrowding from Vast Lakeview in the purple area elementary and Sandhills Farm Life in the, what we might call the salmon area, I'm not good with colors, but I think that's more of a salmon or beigey area there with Sandhills Farm Life Elementary. And as we are opening up Deeds, it will open up around 68, 69% capacity. And so that offers us the opportunity to look at other areas around Deeds Creek that we can pull in additional students in this second phase, potentially. That's a question that we need to look at. How might we do that to best utilize the capacity at Deeds Creek? We also know that both Sandhills Farm Life and Vast Lakeview are projected out over the years to be overcrowded again. And so we need to be looking at that as part of our unfinished business. And so the areas that we talked about back in December, that Mike talked about back in December, that we'd be looking at as potential areas is, you'll note, Deeds Creek is in Southern Pines. It's actually a second Southern Pines Elementary School. So that's an area we'll be looking at. But we'll also be looking at this area that's currently in Sandhills Farm Life as a potential area to not only utilize the capacity of Deeds, but look at potential overcrowding at Sandhills Farm Life in the future. Looking at this next area, right close as you'll see on the map, is another area we may look at as potential of pulling into Deeds to reduce crowding at Sandhills Farm Life moving forward. And then we also noted an area up top of the Sandhills Farm Life area in the northern portion that we might look at potentially moving to Carthage or even Cameron. And then lastly, we talked about an additional area of unfinished business there in the Vass attendance area. Vass is projected to be overcrowded out in a number of years, and so we know that Cameron Elementary has a core capacity that might be able to take over 100 additional kids with the addition of a classroom modular unit of 6 classrooms that we would have available for Northmore. So these are some of the things we talked about in December that we know are questions that we need to look at as we move forward into this second phase. Additionally, you'll hear me refer to this when I'm talking about Area 3, but we know we have middle school capacity issues. And New Century Middle and Cranes Creek Middle offer us the opportunity to take a look and ask that question. Might we be able to utilize those middle schools to help us with capacity issues that we know we have in our Area 3 middle schools? The second area, a piece of data that I'd like to share with you that we know is something that compels staff to take a look at when we're utilizing those guiding principles, is that we have a declining enrollment in Area 2, the Northmore High School feeder area. We have good facilities in our Northern Moore schools, but we also have declining enrollment. Over the last 5 years, we see enrollment decrease at Robbins of 10%, High Falls of 14%, Northmore High School of 17%, Westmore of 20%, and that's an overall decline in the last 5 years in Area 2 of 13%. That's significant. We are compelled to look at that. We're compelled to see what can we do to address this when we're looking at an entire district of multi-year student assignment plans. So that's something that we'll be looking at. What might we be able to do with that as we move forward with the capacity we know that's available in our Northern Moore schools. And then Area 3, I'd like to share with you some data around balance and capacity in our Area 3 feeder pattern to Pinecrest High School. There's several things that we know offer us the opportunity to look at this that we have not had in the past. The Deeds Creek, as I noted, is a 800-student elementary school that is opening up in Southern Pines. It's a second Southern Pines Elementary School. We have 3 large elementary schools that will be opening up, our new Aberdeen Elementary, our new Southern Pines Elementary, and Pinehurst Elementary will be built to be 800-student elementary schools. That offers the opportunity to look at crowding at West Pine Elementary. If we look at that, we then could look at crowding at West End Elementary. That has seen an increase in enrollment, significant increase in enrollment over the last year or two. And then we also gives us the opportunity, when we're looking at that balance and capacity guiding principles, of looking at the significant demographic imbalance that we see at our West Pine and our Southern Middle schools and their feeder patterns therein. So it offers us that opportunity, and it demands our attention to look at it as we walk through this process.
Tim,
Yes, ma'am.
is West End currently closed to transfers?
It will be for next year, yes, ma'am.
This coming up
This coming year, it is
Okay.
a closed school.
Okay, okay.
It was not this year, but it is only for
And
next.
do you know right offhand what the student limit is by chance for West End?
I do not off the top of my head. We have those capacity charts, but I
Okay,
don't know.
no.
I wouldn't want to, that's where,
curious.
I didn't mention John's not with us today, and that
Yeah.
he's someone who could come right back.
Yeah.
John is not with us, but of course will be with us throughout this process.
Just curious.
When you're looking at the capacity, you've done the decrease enrollment. Can you look at the growth in those schools with percentages for Sand Hills Farm Life, Vast Lakeview, West End, West Pine Elementary School, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll look at some trends at those schools. We'll try to do 5 years.
That's the whole point of the process.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's, yeah, very much a part of what we do. But that's not something we come back to you next week on. I mean,
Yeah.
that's gonna be part of the analytics that are involved. That'll be all part of the discussion, right?
Other questions before we share some data about our Area 3 patterns of imbalance and capacity? All right, so the first chart I want to share with you shows you our Area 3 middle school free and reduced lunch patterns. These are the students who qualify, percentage of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. That means they come from families that are economically disadvantaged. Southern Middle School has 60% of their students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. West Pine Middle has 23%. That's a 37% differential discrepancy that we see between those two schools. When we look at demographics in our Area 3 middle schools, the chart on the left as you're looking at the slide is Southern Middle School. On the right is West Pine Middle School as you're looking at the slide. The orange represents the white population. The other pieces of the pie graph represent other racial groups. Southern Middle School has 42% white and 58% other racial groups. West Pine Middle has 75% white, 25% other racial groups. We talk about achievement when we talk about balance. How are schools performing, creating balance with achievement? And I know these numbers are hard to read. What we really want to focus on are the bars. The bars on the left represent Southern Middle. Bars on the right represent West Pine Middle, both grade level proficiency and college career readiness. And you can see the discrepancy that lies there over the last 5 years between Southern Middle and West Pine Middle in overall school proficiency.
And so for these, Tim, for both schools, curriculum is basically the same. I mean, the students are offered same curriculum as what's being offered at West Pines.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The next chart I'd like to share with you is looking at those feeder elementaries into our middle schools, our Area 3 elementary free and reduced lunch patterns. We look at our feeder elementaries for Southern Middle, that's our Aberdeen schools and our Southern Pine schools, 67% of their students qualify for free and reduced lunch. We look at our feeder elementaries into West Pine Middle, Pinehurst, West End, and West Pine, 28% of their students qualify for free and reduced lunch. That's a 39% differential. Lastly, I'd like to take a look, and you can't read this chart well on the slide, but I'm going to point out a couple key pieces here. This is the capacity chart of our Area 3 middle school and the projections of their capacities moving out all the way to 2027. Let's just focus in on the year 2022, and you can see that Southern Middle is projected to go down in attendance. West Pine Middle is projected to go up, all the way up to over 133% capacity. Southern Middle at 82% capacity. But even if we combine the two schools' capacity, in the year 2022, you still see that our Area 3 middle school capacity overall is over capacity. We're still over capacity in our Area 3 middle schools, even if we were to equally combine those two schools. So that's something just wanted to point out, that that is a challenge, a piece of data that we're compelled to look at as we move through this process. Let's pause one more time for any other questions before I turn it over to Laura to do a review of our guiding principles.
To reemphasize that, so what you're telling us is that we're going to need to build another middle school.
That
That
is
is
certainly
in our
Mike could
future.
probably chime in, but yes, that is one, and we also need to look at capacity availability in other middle schools in our district, like Cranes Creek and New Century.
Yeah, I think we should do them in that order. The current capital plan that was approved by the school board in 2014 includes another middle school, but I think if you look at the total, if you look at the bottom chart and go all the way to the right-hand column, projected 2027, you'll see a total number of students at both Southern Middle and West Pine Middle of 1,578, with a total capacity of 1,400. That is alarming that it's 178 students more than capacity, but it's also not enough to justify the construction of another 700-student middle school. So we have to be mindful of capacity that we have at New Century and Cranes Creek as a consideration, because we simply can't ask to build what would amount to be maybe a $50 million middle school at this point for 178 students, when we have room for those students right next door. So, you know, everything about Tim's presentation today with Mike and Laura is about what are the challenges that confront the advisory committee to the superintendent as it formulates the plan. And these definitely are challenges. But I don't want to very quickly throw out the fact that we can just build a new school. I mean, it's, as you can tell, it takes a while to get to that point. So we need to look at some intermediate measures.
Yes, sir.
Tim, I have a comment. I'd like to make sure that the public understands. People have a tendency to look at figures, and particularly for the economically disadvantaged schools, where there are a lot of them, look at performance and try to blame it on the teachers. I want the public to understand that all our staffs are great staffs. The challenges that these with large percentage economically disadvantaged schools are enormous. But we have the people there to meet them, but there are other things that we can do to help. And I just want to make sure that none of this is a staff problem. It's another type of problem.
The only other thing I'd point out is that, you know, we know that there was a fire at West Pine Middle this weekend, and we have modulars there. And so if there are opportunities to really diminish our need for these modulars, that would be a benefit as well. So that's something that we hadn't really thought about, didn't have to think about until this weekend, but now we know
We
that.
should have thought about it.
Well, we have thought about it.
We have, yeah, that's a part, and that's a part of
Well,
it.
in depth thought about it.
I think that the
Yeah.
concerns that we expressed to the commissioners about modular units, this weekend's event proves that we weren't making that up.
Right.
There are legitimate reasons why you do not want to depend on modular buildings.
Right.
Now, there are steps you can take to, mitigate that risk, and with our modular units, our standalone modular units have very quick access. It's very easy to get out of them in a hurry. But I think that, we were reminded this weekend that it's not just modular units, it's old modular units. We have a lot of them that we've been using for a very long time. And so by building new schools, we create opportunity for us to look at revising our student assignment plan, and that's precisely what we're doing. In accordance with the guiding principles. I don't want to steal the thunder. Our consultants are just getting ready to talk about why we do that, so. Tim?
Mr. Locklear, too, and following up on Ms. Thompson's question about curriculums at the school, that's a state mandated curriculum, so we're going to be offering the same quality program at any school in the county, no matter what the makeup of the students is. In addition, we have the same teams, the same clubs, the same extracurricular opportunities for the kids at both of these schools. And so no matter what, the programs are there, it's what the kids make of them and where they can go with them. So I think we can be very proud that every middle school in the county has the same offerings and brings these same opportunities to our students.
We will see as we get into this that there are variations, though, in terms of what the volunteer communities can have the capacity to provide for their schools, and there are very distinct differences between those.
Yeah.
So as we know, we have schools that have more technology because their parents are able to step up and provide beyond what the school board provides. We have schools that may have the same athletic teams, but some are able to do things more than others in terms of their equipment and their uniforms that supplement the school board budget. And then we also have schools that have field trip opportunities that greatly exceed the field trip opportunities of other schools that, again, go above and beyond what the school board provides. So I think all of that is going to be a very fair part of the conversation as we move forward. At this point, we want to make sure that we avoid definite statements, that we know, because we are going to be looking at the full gamut of the challenges that we have. So I would want to just temper that just a little. It's not that, in terms of what the school board provides to our schools, that is equitable. And some schools have more, and that's a credit to the parents whose children attend those schools. But then we do need to recognize the fact that there are some schools that don't have that same, the families in those schools don't have that same capacity to provide that supplemental service beyond what the school board provides, just for the public record. Mr. Locklear?
Yes, sir. I'll turn it over to Laura to review the board's guiding principles and the process behind that. Laura?
Thanks, Tim. Madam Chair, Superintendent Bob, and members of the board, it's good to be back. Mike and I were just talking yesterday about being excited about coming back for a second year. I particularly want to thank you for the beautiful weather you called up today for me. I live over there in the area of the state where it's frigid right now. so I'm enjoying the sunshine. We began working with you guys last May or June. I don't remember specifically, but one of the first things we talked about was we needed some guiding principles to help us through the process. And so we met with you on June 11th in a work session. And if you'll remember, we had chart paper all around the walls, and you guys were up and moving, and there was a lot of good discussion, a lot of good ideas put on the table about what we should consider when drawing attendance areas. And then we took that feedback from you guys and we took it to the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. And they reviewed your discussions and also added to the discussion on what should be considered when you're developing an attendance area for a school. And then out of all of that, we brought you some recommendations, and you approved those guiding principles as the foundation of our work last year. And looking back over the year, Mike and I said, wow, we had a really great year. And it was mainly because we had solid guiding principles to go by, okay? So how did all that come about? We started talking about your policy on student assignment. If I could get this little clicker to work here. You have a good solid policy on student assignment. You believe every student should have access to a high quality education. That's excellent. Then we focused on the last sentence of your policy. The Board of Education may redraw attendance lines as necessary based on space availability and other relevant factors. And we said to you, what do you mean by that? Other relevant factors. And that's where the guiding principles started to develop, okay? We also talked about why would we even have guiding principles? Well, that's really important. You've got to have the guiding principles because you need to fill in that blank on your assignment policy, okay? You need guiding principles so that you, the board members, and the staff can have a way to support what you're proposing as the attendance areas, okay? And you need to be able to analyze the relationship of the moves that you're making and why you're doing it, all right? And then this was key that we were very transparent to the community of why we proposed the moves, okay? And what did we come up with? Well, we said, well, hold on a minute. We want to make sure you understand that you're going to get some guiding principles that you can't prioritize. Don't try to prioritize the guiding principles. That's not going to work, because there's going to be a push and a pull as you work through the assignment areas. Some guiding principles are going to overlap. Some guiding principles are going to conflict. And we saw that last year, okay? Sometimes we may not realize the extent of the guiding principle, but we're working toward it, okay? We saw that again last year. And then, I had to click one more time. Somebody's got these things shooting in there, and I'm like, wait a minute, what am I missing? And then the guiding principles are also dependent on what schools are involved, or the impact area. So last year we worked in Area 1, so we really didn't realize anything in Area 3 or Area 2. But that's going to change as we work through those areas this year, okay? And we'll expand the impact area. So on June 11th, we heard a lot of feedback. This is what we heard. We basically heard 4 major categories. Balance. You felt like you wanted your schools to have some sort of balance. And you heard Tim talk a lot about that just a minute ago. Balance. Balanced utilization for all of the schools, balanced program opportunities, balanced demographic factors, okay? We heard you talk about good, solid planning, okay? Making sure that whatever we did, we provided stability for our students and our families. Being that I was from Wake County, you know our history in Wake County, you didn't want to repeat the problems of Wake County, where we would move students more than once in a short period of time. The stability was important to y'all, okay? You wanted to make sure we considered the impact of programmatic changes, what assignment might affect, how assignments might affect that. Keeping neighborhoods and communities together, that was important to you guys. It's important to know what future growth is coming your way and keep that in our planning, okay? And utilize up-to-date membership. Mike just told me as we walked in the building that he's currently in the process of geocoding this year's students so that we will have the most up-to-date student membership as possible as we work through this year. And you also wanted us in our planning to consider feeder patterns, elementary to middle and middle to high. The other 2 big groups you talked about were efficiency. A goal is to eliminate the use of modular and mobile units. We need to consider travel distance. That's super important. And walking and safety issues for our students. And then the 4th big category was about community. And we wanted to communicate with our stakeholders. We wanted our stakeholders to be involved in the process, to understand the process, to be able to provide the feedback of the process. And through all that, we wanted to be firm, fair, and consistent with the guiding principles. And finally, to be sensitive to the needs of Moore County schools and what makes Moore County schools great. So all of that was discussed by you guys on that June 11th meeting and by the advisory committee members at that follow-up meeting. And so we came back to you with a summary, and we said, okay, we heard you, and now this is what we propose. Same 4 categories: balance, planning, efficiency, community. And we just put it all in simpler sentences, but I feel like we did a good job capturing your thoughts in these 4 categories. And we started everyone with the sentence, to the extent possible. Remember, you get back to those other things that said they conflict or may not be achievable, that kind of thing. So each category is, to the extent possible, we would like to move in this direction. Okay, so the assignment proposal should provide balance in building utilization, program opportunities, and student demographics. To the extent possible, the assignment proposal should seek to optimize operational efficiency. Under planning, use up-to-date school and planning data, provide stable assignments that are forward-thinking and responsible to community and student needs. And under community, the assignment proposal should promote transparency and be sensitive to the needs of our families. We really had great parental input last year. We had community meetings. It was a good year, and we're really optimistic that with these same guiding principles, this year will go well too. And so what we proposed, you guys affirmed at your meeting on July 16th. And I think I think part of today's discussion is to ask that you affirm these again for this year's phase 2 or year 2 of the assignment process. Any questions?
I would just ask that we pause for a moment and allow board members to express if you, in reviewing this or since last fall, does anybody have any particular thoughts about these guiding principles? We will ask you to suggest revision. If you want to revise, today is a day to talk about that a little bit and provide the staff with guidance between now and next week, because the staff would ask that you revise and affirm or simply affirm. So, Madam Chair, I'll just turn it over to board members for a few minutes just to have some at least preliminary conversation about that.
Are there any comments about how it went last time? Thoughts?
I think the principal served us well last year, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I liked working with these and then working with advisory committees on this, because it gave us an opportunity to speak and gave the community an opportunity to speak. We had such a good variety of meetings over that time period, and I would hope we could do, and looking at Dr. Bob's timeline on various things, we're looking at something very similar, and I feel that we can support the community. And like you, Bruce, if it's not broken, let's keep it like it is.
I'm fine using the same principles, continue to use them.
Consistency.
I have to agree with the first three. I think these work so well for us, especially being very transparent in what we're doing. We're not trying to skirt around anyone's back and move their child somewhere. We want people to know what is ahead, have a chance to really speak up and be heard and have it all considered. So I really like the way they played out on our first efforts.
I'm going to skip you, Ms. Thompson, for a second. Can we? I'll come back to you in a minute.
I was going to say, I agree with them all, especially being on both sides of the spectrum last time, because my child was affected with that. So I was there as a parent, but I was also there as a board member, and I think their guiding principles were wonderful on the parent side and as a board member side.
So, Ms. Thompson, you were not here last time. Are there any, this is an opportunity for you to ask us any questions as board members, if you have any. I know you've been watching and paying attention, but are there any questions that you have, or
I
do
don't
you want
have
clarification?
any questions. I know that the first community forum that I attended before the election was in October, and that was at Carthage. And one of the parents that spoke actually was thankful of how well that they had been informed. I don't know if you guys remembered, but she was very thankful of the process of how the board went about to get them informed, and the assignments, and being open and honest with the process as it unfolded. So on that night, I thought, wow, thankfully we don't have any negative comments. So I don't have anything new to add. I think I've looked at it, and I think it hit on everything that we need to assure that stays in front of us as we go through this phase as well.
Great, I wanted to make sure you were comfortable because you were the one that was not involved in this process the
Thank
first
you.
time around. I think the only other thing I would add is I agree that the principals were very effective, and I remember the challenge that we had is that sometimes one principal would impact another principal. Bruce, you often talk about the whack-a-mole effect, and it's hard to keep them all in balance. And that was something we struggled with the first time around, and I think the process, though, helped us struggle with that transparently and in the open with everyone. So from my opinion, and it sounds like from the rest of you, there's a consensus that these principles will continue to be an effective guiding tool for us. Is that, I know we're not voting on it, but I want to give some guidance to Dr. Grimacy and the staff about any changes. It doesn't sound like we're proposing any changes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for walking through
Full
that.
speed ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Well, the last thing we'd like to review with you, as we've heard, the timeline and process, proposed timeline and process as well, to get your endorsement and support of that. Obviously, today, we're sharing this information with you and asking for your recommitment to those guiding principles. Once you, pending your approval of this, on February 11th, we'll move forward with staff working with and our consultants working with our advisory committees to develop the first draft of the school assignment plan to bring to you on April 1st. In just a couple slides, I'll talk a little bit more about the structure for our advisory committee that we'll be using in this process, which is a little bigger than what we had during the first step. So we do want to talk a little bit more about that as we wrap up the presentation. But we'll bring that first draft to you on April 1st, and we'll present that to you. And then immediately the next 2 nights, we'll have community input sessions at New Century Middle School and Southern Middle School to gather input from our community. We then will go back with that input, and with staff and Numerex will work with the advisory committee to continue to gain feedback and input to bring a second draft to you at your May school board work session. Again, going back to our community for community input sessions at New Century and Southern Middle. And then we'll have a pause from there where we'll continue to do work on the student assignment plan, but we'll be hitting the end of the school year. We'll be going into the summer, and so Numerex and our advisory committee have some planned meetings over the summer. We'll continue to be looking at that input, continue to refine the draft with Dr. Grimacy, and Dr. Grimacy will be bringing his recommended multi-year student assignment plan back to you in September of 2019. We've already got a date for a public hearing, which would be the final opportunity for the
That's
public.
a tentative date.
Tentative date,
Yeah,
yes,
we-
sir.
yeah,
So
we're saying
thank you.
mid-September with September 12th being.
It's easier to change the date than to make it late.
That's right.
I certainly learned that from Dr. Grimacy. So we certainly can change that based on the board's recommendation. But we'll have a school board hearing in September to receive additional input from our community. And then at your October school board work session, you would certainly advise staff and the superintendent, Dr. Grimacy, if there's any revisions that you would like. And then at your October 14th business meeting, you would approve and take final action on the multi-year student assignment plan.
And Tim, is with the locations of New Century and Southern Middle, is the plan to do an overview of the assignment with specific focus on the schools and the feeders within those areas? So, for example, New Century, you would mainly focus on the Carthage and the Robbins, that type area. Is that what the plan is?
Yes, ma'am. We would,
Okay.
at New Century, we would focus on area 1 and 2.
Okay,
The
okay.
feeder schools for Union Pines and the
Okay.
feeder patterns into Northmore High School. We would most likely hit on the other, but we'd focus on those 2 areas and gain feedback from those community members and parents. And then at Southern Middle, we would focus in on area 3, the feeder pattern for Pinecrest.
Okay, and I ask because I've already had questions from different ones, so I just want to let them know where they need to show up.
Yes, ma'am.
To get some
Great question.
information.
Yes, ma'am.
If I might, Tim?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, board members, what we don't have on the timeline is 3 additional meetings that I'll be conducting, similar to the meeting that I conducted at the Douglas Center on Thursday night. I'll be doing that in February and March. My goal is to conduct at least 3 meetings of that nature and get them finished at least 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the presentation of the first draft. And my goal there, Ms. Thompson, is to conduct one in the Northmore area, and then one in the Union Pines area, and one in the Pinecrest area.
Okay.
And it'll be a preview of the process. Some of the information we're sharing here, I'll review that again, but questions in each community are going to be a little bit different. And so that'll be just from the superintendent's perspective. We won't have Mr. Miller and Ms. Evans there. It's not intended to be real technical, but it is intended to answer some of the questions that you're hearing. So we're still in the process of working that out with principals, location, and exact dates, but you can expect that very soon. We'll put that out.
Right. And just to let other board members know, and Betty, if you want to jump in, certainly feel free. But Betty and I attended the forum that was held at Douglas. I thought it went extremely well. Dr. Bob was very open and honest as he provided something similar with regard to our plan, guiding principles. And what our timelines were going to be and how the whole plan would unfold with community forums. There were some questions, and I think he responded to those very open and honest and was transparent throughout the process. So I appreciate, Dr. Bob, your candor to let the community know that we're going to have some tough decisions that we're going to have to make as we go forward. But we want to look at all areas, all questions. As he said, that we want all skeletons to come out of all closets, so to speak. But we want to make sure that we have everything, all questions, concerns out in the forefront as we proceed in this process.
You know, to add, excuse me.
I wanted to chime in and say that I appreciated the fact that Dr. Bob created a climate that offered the family members and parents and teachers that were there a comfortableness, if there is such a word, to ask those questions and to be open about that. And I appreciated the civility of it all as well as the openness that occurred. And so, and there were family members and parents and others that stayed afterwards to ask questions of us individually. And so that also opened up some chains of communication. So thank you.
Well, speaking of communication, a thank you to Mary Kate for the very thorough article she did to follow up the meeting, because I was not at the meeting, and I've had people ask me questions about it as well because they had read the pilot article, and they were very pleased to see that there was such extensive explanation of what happened. So thank you very much.
And I would just say that there are many questions there aren't any answers to, because that's the whole purpose of the process. And so a lot of times there are just some folks that think, well, do you already have your mind made up? Is there a master plan? Is there, there really isn't. The guiding principles really are what this process is about. And got a lot of positive feedback. And that's the model that we'll make available in each of the feeder areas, and in a model that if there's other groups, PTAs and whatnot, that I can physically do it, I'll get to as many of those as I can and help with the process. The difference between these forums and those to come is that these are about the general process and the challenges that beset the school district as we move forward. Later on, the forums that are included in Mr. Locklear's plan, these are specific opportunities to address the drafts of the plan. So when you look in here and you look at April 2nd and 3rd, when you come to those forums that night, you're actually going to have the plan, and we're going to engage you in activities to help you gather around, just as we did last fall, and weigh in on you know, what might we be missing here, or what might we be accomplishing here, and what revisions should we consider. And we'll do that for 2 drafts before we then, you know, take the summer to take all that input and analyze it and bring back a final proposal for you all in September.
Will you have dates for these upcoming forums when we come back next week?
I mean, the ones that I'm going to
That you're
conduct?
gonna
Oh,
conduct.
I hope so. Yeah, we're in the process. I've got a couple of principals that are just looking at their calendars, and we should have that by the end of the week.
Are these April and May dates for first and second draft reviews, are those pretty firm?
Yes, ma'am.
So folks, we
Yes,
can
ma'am.
let
Yeah,
folks know.
Yeah, we don't have any choice with our consultants who are not doing this voluntarily. There are some business obligations that we have here, so we do have to put those on the calendar. Dr. Bob and the principal can always find another date, but when we've got people coming in from out of town, we've got to set dates and stick with them.
Well, the other part, because Stacy and I and Bruce part of the time participated in the first phase of this. By setting this up, even though we can't satisfy everyone as much as we'd like to, at least people were heard and knew where we were coming from. And I think by continuing that vein, we'll again put the trust with us that we're doing it for the benefit of our students.
That's a good segue to a description of the advisory committee. So, Madam Chair, with your permission,
Yes,
we'll
please.
get back to Mr. Locklear.
Thank you, sir. Yes, as noted earlier, did want to give a little more information about the advisory committee to the superintendent and the student assignment process, the structure of that, how it is a bit different, bigger, broader than it was in the summer and the fall of 2018. So membership's going to include, of course, district staff, our consulting partners. We'll have a principal, a teacher, and a parent from each school in the county except our high schools, who are the recipients of what this new feeder pattern will be, and Pinckney Academy. Additionally, there'll be one team that will represent both our Aberdeen schools and our Southern Pines schools, since they will be consolidating and be coming together. So altogether, that's 18 to 19 teams, so about 60 folks who will be on this advisory committee. And the structure of that will work where we'll have a general session or opening session where we're sharing information and data that we want to get their feedback and thoughts and ahas about, and then they'll be breaking up into each area. Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, and our high school principals are going to be the chairs to facilitate those areas. They've agreed to help facilitate those area breakouts based on the protocol that we give them, make sure we're getting good feedback from each individual area, and then coming back together to share some key points before we end our days. So that's how those advisory committees will work. And they'll obviously work on the development of all 3 of the plans with Dr. Grimacy as he presents his final recommendation in September. So any questions about how the advisory committee will work?
And just to underscore that these are advisory committees to the superintendent.
Correct.
So this is really to help formulate the plan that then we, as the board at the end, will take a look at. So the very first part of this is really focused on staff engagement with the community, and us sort of letting them do their job.
And that's, I might add, that's the reason why we don't have any school board members on the committee this time, because it's the whole county. And so effectively, every one of those would become mandatory school board meetings. So, you know, my hope is that you'll allow me to work with the advisory committee and do the work that we can. Then the community forums are different. That's wide open. But it's not that there's a secret or anything. It's just that out of fairness to all board members, I think, you know, we either have to have everybody or nobody at those meetings. And so there's a lot of people there. We're going to have our hands full making sure that those are working meetings. Those aren't meetings where you just put something out. I mean, remember at that point, the advisory committee will have already had the community forum. They will have taken all the input, and now they're trying to make sense of that, and they're getting down into the details of discussing, you know, where this should be and where that line should be, and what did we hear at that most recent meeting, and is that something we can accommodate, not accommodate? So that'll be where we'll be really making sausage at that point, and the committee's going to be needed to have some discretion with that. We'll appreciate your accommodation there. questions and discussion. I guess that's what we're doing.
Yes, sir.
One question. Obviously, this is going to be, the dates and what are going to be distributed to all the schools and through the newspaper and whatnot. Has anyone given consideration to notifying daycares and or preschools within our area? And I'm thinking, because I have a grandchild who's going to enter one of these brand-new schools. And I was telling my daughter with her 3-year-old that she ought to pay attention to what was going on because it could affect her. And I don't know that we have actually tapped into that community resource. Now, I'm not asking anybody to go out and look up every name of every preschool, but there is a thing called the Child Care Network, which regularly sends emails to all the licensed daycares and preschools within town that we might be able to work through that group, and they could disseminate information for us as well. But that's a huge
Defer to-
population that'll be coming
Well,
to
let's
that.
defer to Ms. Murphy on that one.
Okay, Ms. Murphy.
Catherine, is the board is inquiring about communications with, go ahead.
With daycares and preschools within the area, but like I said, I think we could work through the Child Care Network, who already has that ability to disseminate information.
She was mentioning it's called Partners for Children.
Yeah, that one.
And, so we could let them know that this is going on, tell them to let.
Make it real simple for us, but just one more name to add.
The only other thing I'd add is I just want to point out that this is an 8-month process. Just let that sink in. It's an 8-month process, so we're just at the very beginning of it, and there'll be a lot of work to be had, and every stone will be uncovered to make sure we do it right,
Yeah.
rather than doing it quickly.
We'd rather do it right than to do it. Thank you, ma'am. Couldn't agree more.
And the last thing I'll say is, really reflecting on where we ended in phase 1 with McDeed's Creek and how important it was that we stopped where we did, because we realized the impacts that having this brand new school, along with having these larger schools come online in the next 2 years, what impact and domino effect that has on the rest of the county. And so I really appreciate the thought that staff, Dr. Grimmincy and staff, have put into kind of thinking about this real bigger picture that we have not had the opportunity to consider before. And having these new schools where they are located makes a big difference. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and hearing where we go from here. So thank you.
Madam Chair, there'll be 2 motions that the staff will recommend. One, we will, as we indicated before, we'll seek your reaffirmation of the guiding principles, and also we'll appreciate your endorsement for the public record of the process and timeline. So if there are any further thoughts about that, let us know. Otherwise, we'll be intending to bring back what we've presented today.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
With your permission, Madam Chair,
Yes.
we'll thank our panel, and we'll invite Mr. Leeson to provide us with a fresh face and a fresh voice on an agreement for,
Yes,
enable us to
Dr. Grimmincy,
address some road improvements.
members of the board, related to our opening of a new school in September, we need to construct some road improvements. It's basically either end of Camp Easter Road. So as it says in the item, Fairway Drive at NC 22 and at Camp Easter Road at Niagara Carthage Road. What this will do is allow us to install a turn lane. In order to do that, we have to acquire right-of-way from the neighboring properties. There's 12 of them in those 2 locations. So this item is to hire a consultant to perform activities related to the acquisition of land. We've identified Vistibution for their expertise in acquisition and to assist in the process. The services required consist of identifying landowners and conducting initial meetings, establishing a fair market value for the land and the required portions, preparation of right-of-way claim report using NCDOT forms, and then title option as needed, and negotiate settlement for the condemnation if needed, and then making offers for the 12 land purchases. This is set up, the contract you'll be approving is set up as a not-to-exceed, and the not-to-exceed sum is $113,376. Yeah, you're seeing what I've had her call up is the hourly flat rate schedule for the consultant, And John and I did a calculation of if everything went smoothly and everyone accepted their offer immediately and there wasn't any other items, we might save as much as $40,000 from that sum. If everything goes badly, the consultant is on the hook for completing the work for that sum. So it's a not-to-exceed contract of $113,000 and some change.
Roger, when you say 12 priorities, would you kind of describe what you mean by 12 priorities?
We're 12 parcels,
Thank you.
pieces of property. Did I misspeak? I'm sorry.
So
Yes.
we're talking about very small,
Yeah, slivers of
Parcels.
land, basically, to create
Turn
another
lanes.
20, 25 feet of width to install a turn lane.
and this is in order to ensure safety once traffic picks up, which was a concern of our neighbors.
It'll give us stacking room and separate left turns from right turns, so that it's a little more expeditious to leave Camp Easter Road.
So what I want to add, though, is I just want to say that even though this can be a stressful conversation, the administration's intent is to fulfill exactly what our neighbors had expressed concern about, and that is to make sure that at those times of day when there's more traffic, that the roads can accommodate that traffic more effectively and more safely. And so we're hoping that for the most part, this will align with the interests of our neighbors, and it'll actually bring some improvements that some of them said that they'd been wanting for quite some time.
And just a reminder, this was already known that we'd use the contingency this way, right? Because we didn't
Yes.
know how much we needed, but we knew we needed a contingency for just this thing.
Right, a project
among others.
contingency is for unforeseen items that you can't define when you set your project budget.
Right.
And that's the funds we'll be utilizing, and it was listed here as $686,000 in contingency.
It was a known unknown, is that
A
right?
known
It was one of
unknown.
those, yeah, okay. We just didn't know at the time how much, which parcels and all of
Exactly,
that. Okay.
exactly. What the extent of the road improvements would need to be.
An additional highway question, and this has nothing to do with this really, but where do we stand with the roundabout they were gonna add down at Midland Road and 22? Is that still in the works?
It's been on again, off again, and I'm not sure it's been resolved yet.
They haven't been able to get a paver to take a bid to do it. So they delayed it for a year. I live right around
I know you do, yeah.
and so I've been checking on that.
Now, that Midland Road project is an NCDOT project.
Right, it's not a school project, but I know that that's gonna be impacted, that area will be impacted as well.
Yes.
And,
Will be impacted, but I think NCDOT already
They have to
identified
handle
that as a need in advance of the school.
it's already a need, it
Yeah,
has nothing to do with
yeah.
the school.
Yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to misalign this, that's
Correct.
the only reason for that project is our school. There's a lot of other reasons.
No, there
for
are
that.
many, many reasons, a lot of traffic on that road.
And as stated in the last sentence here, we will apply to the DOT for applicable costs of the improvements we're setting up to make right now.
Question, board members?
Is the 113 the total of the appraisals and the contacts? Is that the cost of the dirt and the?
No, that's the consultant services, Distribution's estimate of their effort to obtain a price for those pieces of land. The price, the actual price you pay for the land will be separate.
Have any sense of what that might be?
I believe $40,000 was what was discussed as an approximation.
For
It
the,
gives you an idea of the size of the parcels we're talking about.
Yeah, very small
and that's
pieces of land
for 12 parcels.
for all 12.
Not for each, for together.
Together,
But again, that's what I was led to believe.
okay.
So
All right, I hope the
Which was
negotiations
fa-
go well.
It's the reason why I asked for the clarification on it as
So-
well, because I've seen the plans, and the plans are for lots of different small square footages, and you know, there's a few that are larger, but for the most part, we're not talking about a traffic circle here. We're
No.
talking about turn lanes.
Narrow strips of land along the road.
That's right.
But 12 different potential property holders,
All of whom have to be treated
all of whom have to
individually,
be
right?
treated through this process, yes.
You know, we need somebody who can devote themselves to that, because Roger and John can't do that. We need help with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Next topic. Thank you.
That's the worst case scenario.
Ms. Murphy? Item C.
Good afternoon. As we heard from the most very thorough presentation from Mr. Locklear, we do have a countywide redistricting or student assignment plan in process, and as such, we may be wanting to take a look at the existing names of some of our elementary schools that will be coming online. So what you have before you is a proposal for a process and a timeline to evaluate the existing names of Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst Elementary, and go through the process of either renaming or reaffirming the existing names of those schools. The process would involve convening a meeting of community leaders, elected officials, parents, and school administration and staff to develop a short list of potential names, including the existing name of the school, should that group want to also consider that. Go through a process for public comment through an online portal as well as through a public hearing, and then for the Board of Education to take action at a subsequent board meeting. The timeline proposes that we look at Aberdeen and Pinehurst first, with board action culminating at the April regular board meeting, and then at Southern Pines next, with board action culminating at the May 13th board meeting. And I am open for questions or clarification.
Why don't you go ahead and elaborate just a little bit, Catherine, on our different approach here as opposed to McDeeds Creek, given that these are schools that already exist? Well, with a brand-new school, there was
Right.
no existing name. Well,
Right.
I'll go ahead and help you. I thought you'd pick up on that. No, with McDeeds Creek, brand-new school. And so it was, inviting any number of names from everybody. But in each of these communities, we are trying to respect sensitivities of the names of schools. And so we thought that we would start with the premise that there's an existing name, that each school is going to be replaced, but we were trying to give an eye to the tradition that exists there. We've gotten mixed preliminary feedback in different communities about different thoughts about whether or not they want to retain the name or change the name, and if so, what kind of names they would look at. So we thought that convening a bit of an advisory committee and producing a short list, and then allowing when we go to the portal and we have people respond to that, individuals can suggest other names, but we thought we'd start with a short list this time, and that way, sort of very quickly get to what the community's temperament is on each one of these. And offer that to the board, and then the board can do what it wishes from that point on.
Well, I really appreciate getting community input at the beginning, because like you said, there are existing constituencies for these schools. So I think, hearing what their thoughts are up front, I think is going to be really helpful to us. And I like being done quickly on this, as early as possible, so that we can, when we're out there with finishing up the redistricting conversations in the late spring and summer and fall, that we have the new names that we can be using. And I think it's nice forward thinking. I think it's going to be helpful.
Why the combination of Aberdeen and Pinehurst together?
Timing, it has to do with individuals participating in the process, and
But they're not doing them together, it's just around the same
no,
time.
they're not in the same room
Oh,
at the
okay,
same
okay.
time.
Yeah,
That's what I was concerned about.
They're in
because
the, this is timing.
Okay.
And
It
so,
looked like
no,
they were together,
there won't be a
that's why I was
meeting with
wondering.
Aberdeen and
They look like the
Pinehurst,
same
no,
meeting, yeah.
separate locations, same time period, and
Okay.
it just was more convenient for the first two to be in the first month. We didn't want to do all three at the same time, and we also didn't want to drag it into the summertime. We wanted to get them, all three of them done before we got to
It
summertime.
just
So
looked like they were together, that's why
Oh,
I was
no,
asking.
no,
the answer is not very exciting. It's rather routine.
I'd rather it be routine.
So, Madam Chair, we would just be interested in the board's endorsement of that process, or the board's guidance as to how it might prefer to see us do it differently. But again, it's a staff process. We invite board members to oversee it, but we just would appreciate your knowing what your comfort level is with that process.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you,
All
Ms.
right.
Murphy.
Ed has given it a like. Thank you.
Do we want to take a quick break?
We're at your pleasure, Madam Chair.
I know you're ready, Ms. Johnson, but maybe 5 minutes, a 5-minute quick break? right, are we all back? All right, Dr. Grimacy,
Ms. Johnson?
we gave you a little break.
Now she's not ready.
Lost in thought.
You're good.
Actually, we're pretty excited. This isn't just your usual high school course guide presentation.
I'm
This
very
has got a new
excited.
twist to it.
It does have a new twist. So, good afternoon. I'm here to present to you revisions to our high school course guide. We every year bring you the course guide and walk through with you the changes that have been made to the guide, particularly what courses have changed. And so we just want to reiterate the purposes of the high school course guide. It obviously aids in the development of a comprehensive academic and career plan, so it helps students and their families with their counselors and teachers and principals really walk through what the long-range plan is for the student. It really should be a resource for students and parents so that they can really begin to map things out ahead of time. That's really our goal. We also have added, though, that this will serve as a marketing tool for us, as a way to really share with the public and the community all the wonderful things that our high schools have to offer. And so we have changed the format of it to make it more accessible to people so that they really can dig into what does Moore County Schools have to offer for our high school students. So before we get into that, there are 8 new courses that have been added, and so we want to walk through those. The CTE courses that have been added are in digital design and animation. Those courses are specific to graphic design, to film and game design. Students who are in those classes work with professional grade creative software, such as Adobe. They work with 3D modeling. So they do some really hands-on and innovative work in those classes. So we're excited to add that. In the EC area, we are adding 2 courses. The state is adding 2 courses. One is a vocational preparation course, and both of these courses in the EC area are for our EC extended content students. And so these are for our students who are on the extended content standards as opposed to the standards that other high school students take. So the vocational preparation, that is actually an elective course for students that are on the extended standards. It will explore post-secondary options for them as far as employment goes, and it will also teach some job-ready skills that those students may need as they graduate and go into the workforce. And then the other EC extended course is Health, Safety, and Independent Living. This is also a new elective for our extended content students. It teaches functional life skills, and it also focuses on recreational leisure, community activities, and really just starting to look at some more life skills for a healthy, safety, and independent life that we want these students to graduate and have. Then finally, there are some new courses with College Career Promise at Sandhills. These are a part of the health and fitness sciences pathway. It's not a new pathway. They just changed some of the courses that are in that pathway. So you'll see there a lot of those have to do with exercise science and fitness, and then as well as some facility management of fitness in the fitness industry. So with that, unless there's any questions on the courses we've added.
I do.
Sure.
I have some questions. With the health and fitness courses, the state universities have a comparable chart that is available. Has that been vetted by the community? Have those been vetted by the community college as to how they will apply at the colleges and universities, or do you know?
I do not know, but I will get that information and get it back to you. That's an excellent question.
The other part too is that usually when students come in with transfer credits, they still have one physical education that they have to take to get their full PE courses.
Sure.
And none of those are the exercise courses
Correct.
that they require. And so I'm wondering how these fit, or where they fit to be accepted, because some of the prevention care exercise and injuries in the fitness facilities are some that are beginning ones for athletic trainers. But and sometimes the exercise science, depending on how it's taught. So I'm just concerned that I want to make sure if our students are going to transfer and be able to use these effectively in their physical education programs or their sports management courses or whatever, that they will be able to transfer them
Sure,
effectively.
we will look into that, and I'll
Okay.
certainly get back to you. I
Thank
think
you.
if I hear your question right, you're asking if it transfers as their physical education credit.
No, I know that these won't.
Right, that's
But
what
I
I'm
want to
just-
make sure that there is they're going to add these, will they be courses that will apply
Universities
to
will
a
accept.
university for those that might be going into sports management,
Okay.
sports exercise science, whatever it might be in that athletic training, any of those,
Got it.
to make sure that if they're going to take these courses, that they can be applicable to their programs.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
That's assuming they go to a four-year school, and
Yes.
if they are not, then what value do they present in an associate student
Yes.
program?
Yes.
Absolutely. That's a great question, and I'll certainly get back to you. Sure. Any other questions regarding the courses?
Yeah.
Sure.
I must say, first of all, I love the new formatting. I went on and played with the course guide quite a while. It's easy to use.
Ms. Carter,
It's-
can we let her, you're stealing her presentation. Can-
Well,
she
you
was
guys
gonna-
asked for questions.
Well, she was gonna show it.
Yeah, I'll show you the course
Okay,
guide.
about
let me
we-
just, actually, it's good.
Oh,
So
good.
show it
Good
to us.
segue, but
Okay.
it would be
Good.
nice. if
But I
let
do
her-
have but it'll come off the course
Yeah,
guide
let's-
too.
let's
so-
go ahead and,
Okay,
let's go ahead
so if
and,
we could click into the course guide.
along with the presentation, then others will know what you're talking about if you.
So
have
this
it.
is the new high school course guide. We're very excited. And so the high school course guide used to be a Word document. It was approximately 120, 140 pages. And so you scrolled through the Word document to find what you were looking for. And that made it very difficult and very cumbersome. And so we looked around at other districts and looked at what they were doing, and they made a very simple Google site. So we said, well, we can do that. We can make a Google site. So with the help of Steve Johnson and the DIFs, and then with also the help of Karen Werdeman, who is our administrative assistant at the Ed Center, she did a lot of the heavy lifting as far as getting everything transferred into the course. So I did not do that. But we have each section as far as the different academic areas that students can choose from outlined. And if you click into the section, it will take you to the courses that are offered. And so it has all of the same information. It's just broken down into an easier to navigate website. Also, on the top right, it says Table of Contents. If you click there, there's all of the same information that was in our introduction. So that's all there for students. It gives them an idea of some different pathways they could choose. Also gives graduation information, attendance, athletics, all of the information we need them to know before they make choices regarding courses. So now do we have questions regarding
Still
the course
good.
guide?
It's still
Good. I'm glad you still like it.
I spent a lot of time on the CTE section.
Sure.
And I have to say, if I could go back to school now, the CTE classes are phenomenal.
They are.
Phenomenal. The number of kids, we know not everybody needs to go to college. And there are classes in there that are truly going to prepare kids
Absolutely.
to go straight into the workforce. Especially, I love the fact that so many of them in the description say they reinforce English, art, math, and social studies in so many of the, especially the business classes. I did want to ask, is apparel and textile production sewing?
That's an excellent question. I think that
I
it
read
does
the
have some of the
description.
same similarities,
I think we
but they
could
go
have
above and
Amanda
beyond that.
Dixon or Tracy McNeil
Yeah,
could
absolutely.
formulate.
We've never, as far as I know, we haven't had that kind of offering before with
It's
apparel
not
design.
a new offering, but we could certainly get Tracy McNeil or Amanda Dixon to answer questions regarding that. But yeah,
I think it's great if it is. It's almost a lost art. A question: where honors courses are offered, but only at one school, say like automotive service. It's offered at all three of the high schools, but only at Union Pines do they have honors. Now, how is that determination made? Do you know, or maybe that's a Mr. Locklear question? I don't.
Mr. Locklear, you can jump in, but
Or Dr. Metcalf question.
I think it has a lot to do with scheduling, has a lot to do with the amount of students that take the courses and if they're able to offer it based off the schedule. So, for instance, if there are an abundance of kids that take the first level, they probably only have one automotive teacher, can't offer the honors level, vice versa. So I would think it has to do with master scheduling.
Because I would guess sometimes the honors classes are simply integrated in with the regular class, especially if there's not a lot of children that need the honors level.
And it depends on the need and the demand of the students.
I also wanted to make comment. I'm so glad that we're offering personal finance. That is an excellent class, and probably ought to be required of everybody. You know, there's a lot of us that could handle our finances better. On the Sandhills College Promise list, I looked over their list, and lots of those classes are duplicated. That, like, public speaking is on 4 or 5 different career paths that they have in there. How many classes are actually offered on that would count toward the Career and College Promise? I couldn't tell by looking at the list.
Well, they're all offered. I don't know.
Might wanna
if-
defer.
I mean, can they just take
Dr.
anything
Metcalf-
at Sandhills?
Yeah, let's defer. Dr. Metcalf, could you come forward, please? And tell us what we know, and more importantly, what we don't know.
Well, we don't know a lot, but, yeah, we can find out that information for you. A lot of those classes do come up in different pathways and are
Right.
duplicated. You're exactly correct. Some of them in there are gonna be about time that they're offered to. You'll see a difference in some of the classes coming from the CCP, from the college as well. I don't know what the total number of those classes are. It's vast. There's a lot of opportunities for our students to take a variety of classes in a number of different areas and get the dual credit.
Well, I looked at them, and I'm guessing it's that page that had yellow highlighting on it is the ones that are offered. But there's so much overlap, I didn't take the time to try and count them to see what was actually offered, but it's a lot.
Mr. Newton and Ms.
I bet they know.
Ms. Patterson.
Ms. Patterson.
Ms.
Stacey
Patterson and
They're the
Mr.
experts on this. and
Absolutely.
guide our
would be the
students
ones
on
that would be most likely.
The other
They
part
are.
too will be, again, depending on what the student is interested in pursuing, whether they want to go on to a 2-year or 4-year college, because they also have now a chart that the advisors at the community college say, if you want to go to 4-year state university, here are the courses you need to take, and here how they do.
Well, these are broken down kind of like that. If
Yeah.
you're gonna get a certificate, you do these classes or a diploma pathway. But like I say, there, you know, public speaking is listed on about 6 of them, and introduction to computers is listed on 4 or 5 of them. And I was just curious how many classes actually were available to our students. And, you know, and they only have to take 4 classes, right, to get the
Correct.
college support when they enter Sandhills. They have a lot of options
Yes.
to do that.
It really is a great opportunity.
It is.
Any other, yeah, Mr.
Like to make a comment on Libby's comment about automotive. That's an excellent example of a benefit we would receive from the Advanced Career Center, where we had students in high schools that wanted to take that, but there weren't enough students in the school to allow to have a full
Absolutely.
class.
Yep, that's a great point. Other questions?
You're perfect for this job. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you.
I've
That's
really
very kind.
noticed a huge difference since you've been on board, so I want to
Thank
say
you.
thank you for that.
Surrounded by a great team. Thank you. Any other questions regarding the course guide?
Great looking site.
Yeah.
It's fun to look through it. Made me want to go back to school, sort of.
I think it is a real selling point. You
It
know,
is.
if a parent can go online very quickly, they're considering what high school
So
to
visual.
enroll their student in, then it gives them some really good feedback right away.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Nobody can match our offerings.
That's right.
Exactly right.
I think that'll feed into Catherine's marketing program.
Okay.
Madam Chair, next week, as the board considers this, I'll remind you that the action that the board will consider is a motion to approve the course additions, the additions to the courses offered
Okay.
in the guide. Yeah. So it won't be approval of the guide, it'll be approval of the additional courses. And Mr. Locklear, I might suggest that we maybe, in the rewrite of the executive summary, we might want to be a little bit more explicit. Let me just double check. Revision, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong sheet. Yeah, it does say, approve the revisions to the curriculum guide, that's good. All right, Madam Chair, with your permission?
Yes, but the next item is Mr. Dennison, is that correct?
That is correct. I was
Actually, the
going to
next two
defer
items.
to Mr. Dennison and Dr. Brown.
Thank you. I want to thank Elena for reformatting our issues, putting the priority ones on the front page, and we did include the class size for 412 in with the K3 class size, and we also included the testing item that we had talked last time as one of our priorities. And Betty?
The other part to emphasize is that the priorities are in no specific order. All of them are important, as far as we're concerned. The top 5 that we selected or felt like we could work with the legislatures on and hopefully make a difference.
If no one has any questions, we'll have the superintendent's recommendation for the 11th meeting on the 11th.
And I think it's just really helpful to have the priorities split out so that we can focus our legislative efforts on a certain number.
That's the next item.
So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It makes it a lot easier to just go down and see, start with priorities, and then just go down the list. So I think the outline is just a lot easier. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so if the board is happy with your legislative priorities, I'm happy to recommend them.
Okay.
And, Madam Chair, the next one as well, Mr. Dennison and Dr. Wells-Brown.
On the local control of school calendars, it appears there may be a chance that we can really get some action on this year. So we would like to submit this resolution supporting that we make the calendar change, which is, I think there've been about 40 school districts so far through NASBA that have done that. Betty, any further comments?
Just that, I think it was Thursday or Friday, we received information on 2 more school districts that have put this forth to look at a way to start school earlier so that they can get the testing done prior to Christmas. And they feel like the academic scores are better as one of their reasonings behind trying to do this. And that it presents information for teachers so that they, again, January hits with, they talked about sicknesses and weather and things like that. And so that hopefully it would not interrupt as much. Although this year we had 1st of December, we had snow, so who knows?
You know, I know that this is borrowed from the NSBA or whatever. It just 100% goes against my policy of word economy. It is so wordy and so not going to be read. It does worry me. I agree with everything it says, and I do think we need to push for calendar flexibility, but that is one long resolution.
All resolutions are too long as far as I'm concerned.
Well, maybe so. Maybe so. Having taught kids how to write resolutions to do congressional debate, this one is just way overdone. But
Sounds like you're just offering your services to the school board.
I'll get my red pen back out.
As long as they get the idea, that's what counts.
Well, I think there's some benefit in having joint advocacy with our partners in other districts. So to hear that there's already several dozen other school districts that have submitted this resolution or their version of it. I know in here we have the days that we've missed because of weather events and such. So I think having that data in front of our legislators is very beneficial. So thank you for pushing this forward. Are there any other questions or comments?
If this doesn't get favorable action, I would be intrigued about the notion of just calling ourselves a system-wide year-round district and setting our own calendars. So
That's what others are doing.
and understand that's permissible. There's no definition of year-round school. Just do it.
That's a good segue to 3A, Mr. Cunningham.
That's why I said that.
Stay tuned. Dr.
tuned for
Metcalf
later
is
in the
coming
agenda.
up.
Mr.
He's ready
Dennison, are
too.
there any others that are being pushed forward like this one is by the NCSBA, that other resolutions are going to be
There-
put forward?
Two resolutions have been filed so far. One of them is much redder than the other. One of them is wide open, which they're not going to approve. The other one lists specifically matching the dates of the community colleges in the particular area, with a couple counties that did it together. So that would be my approach, that we would do the same thing if we could get Alan to introduce a bill for Moore County, so we'd match Sand Hills Community College, and the county he's in, Randolph County, to match Randolph Community College. I think that would satisfy what we're looking for.
But aside from school calendar, are there any other resolutions aside from school calendar?
Oh, aside from, not that I'm aware of,
I
no.
thought there was a 15-point about the grades.
Well, you can report on that.
Those are legislations. I don't know that they're resolutions.
No,
are they?
they aren't, you're right, they're legislation.
Yeah, there's lots of legislation, but the question was about NCSBA resolutions. Are
No,
there any
no.
more that you know of? Okay.
No, they have none of this.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Again, if the board is, got a consensus of support for its resolution, Ms. Carter, with or without the verbiage, as
just
long
leave
as
it all in
if the
there.
board agrees on the point of the resolution,
And we
then
do.
I will be happy to recommend it next week.
Good. Thank you.
With your permission, Madam Chair, I'll invite Mr. Bundy to come forward to offer our second quarter amended budget resolution. Mr. Bundy.
Madam Chairman, Dr. Grimsey, members of the board, this is the, as Dr. Grimsey stated, just the second quarter of the budget ordinance that we'll look at. And just as you can see from the executive summary, what we've done is just detailed the various changes to the PRCs beginning with the State Public School Fund. You will see some adjustments for charter schools. Charter schools are funded by the state, and the normal growth of a charter school is built into the state budget. However, when you have a new charter school or dramatically growing charter schools, that ADM is included in the initial allotment that the school gets from the state. So there's kind of a true-up process that happens in November. So as the true-up process takes place, and students are not in our district, they are attending charters, they pull that money back from our funding. So that's what you see in some of the numbers at the beginning of the State Public School Fund, where the state is adjusting back for students that never were in our school, but it was kind of in the initial allotment that the state provided. So they're adjusting that back. You'll also see.
Let's just pause on that for just a minute.
Yes,
Let's-
sir.
Everybody take a deep breath, and I want to make sure everybody understands what Mr. Bundy just said. Anybody not understand what Mr. Bundy just said?
I have a question.
Yes,
So what ADM do they use to determine the initial allotment?
It's based on, they look at the students in Moore County, then look at what's in the charters, and they know the normal growth of charters. What they can account for is a new school that starts up or a charter that has a dramatic growth. So once they look at that number, then they can adjust back to what our true funding will be, and they make the adjustment usually in November.
Okay, but those students are not actually in our schools.
That's correct. That's
Okay,
correct. And
but
the
they're-
impact this year was really the Moore Montessori School opening up, because that was a brand-new charter with almost 90 kids that impacts the funding, and they pull that funding back and it's sent to the charters, but they do it as a true-up process.
Okay.
When you all acted on the budget last spring and the commissioners approved it, there was an amount of money that said state revenue.
Right.
That amount of money, when you then approved your original budget, went up substantially. But you'll notice that Mr. Bundy and I aren't coming in here saying, hallelujah, look at all this new state money we have. Because we knew that a significant part of that was sort of given to us as a placeholder. And so that state funding, if you go back and look at the original budget, it went up, but we knew that it was gonna come down.
Yes, sir.
Is that a poor man's way of?
Yes, sir.
Of explaining what an accountant can explain much more technically correct?
Yeah.
But I think that the true-up, as Mr. Bundy has said, occurs with this second quarter, because it's here where the October charter school numbers show their impact on our state funding. So don't confuse this with the discussion we're having with your budget. That's the local contribution for charter school children. This is the in and the out associated with state funding associated with our children that attend the charters. And so you see a number of those impacts
Yes,
in
sir.
this second quarter report.
That's correct. You'll also notice, as you move down the list, just the various adjustments for funding. Another big number that you notice is in PRC 056, transportation is $671,000 increase. That is due to the state providing funding to transportation. You get 80% at the start of the year, then they fund you the other 20%. So that's just the extra funding that we get for our transportation department. You'll also notice another number,
Mike, I might add that the state then waits to see what our efficiency rating is for the first quarter and then sets this amount of money based on that. So the second quarter is where you have that true up based on our
Yeah,
efficiency
efficiency
rating.
plus the additional funding that happens in that quarter. You'll also notice another number, 240,631, says increase in PRC 131 textbook and digital resources. The state provides a textbook allotment for each district. However, you can't spend out of that allotment. You got to move the money in other words, move the money to that PRC code before you can spend the funding. You can't spend it out of the textbook allotment. So these are for digital resources and subscriptions that have been identified in our district. So the funding is moved from the textbook allotment to pay for those resources.
And this is money we anticipated getting.
Money we anticipated spending all along. It's part of our digital plan of content through Dr. Metcalf and his staff monitoring the needs, the subscriptions that we need for our students. Next page is local funding, and there's no changes there. Federal program funding is really just adjusting the grants to the actual allotments. When we first approve the budget, that's kind of a low estimate, but then we start looking at when the actual funding comes in, and we'll adjust the allotments to actually agree with the federal funding that we get. There are some funding they come in usually October, November. Some funding happens in later in the year, depending on how the funding is allocated from the the federal government. Especially with the government shutdown, really didn't affect the funding, but it tends to be slower, was last year and it is this year. Let's see, the local capital fund, there's no change. School nutrition, there's no change. The bottom is the local operating fund, and that is your Fund 8, refer to it as Fund 8. And those are just adjustments to adjust to the actual either collections to date or just adjust to the estimated budget for each of those grants.
Case in point, $186,300, those are the fees that
Those
are
are the
paid
fees,
for
the technology fees, correct.
And they've just come in from the schools to
Come
the
in from the school.
centralized technology fund for repair and replacement of damaged
That's
Chromebooks.
exactly right. Yes, sir. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have on that. If you go to the attachment, this is actually the budget resolution, adjusting what is on the executive summary to the actual budget that's approved by the board each quarter. And these numbers are reconciled back to the executive summary. You'll just see that the first is the state public school fund, reconciled back to the front page of $77 million. Next is Fund 2, local fund. If you keep scrolling, please.
Can I point out something on the local funds?
Yes, ma'am.
Our county funding is a certain amount. Charter school funding is a certain amount at the beginning of the year, the preliminary. But just notice, because our charter school allotment went up, what that meant to our local operating costs that we had. So that went down.
Correct.
So there's a corresponding relationship between those two. We have
That's
less
correct.
of the county funding that we
correct.
can actually use
That's correct.
because of the increase in charter school funding.
Yes, the funding that we pay to the charter schools diminishes our ability to service our own students.
And to the extent that those are children that were never in our schools, that is an outright reduction in funding for children in our schools at the expense of our children to benefit the charter school. And it reaffirms the need for there to be a separate local charter school fund to account for the children that are never in Moore County schools. This is a classic example, and I applaud the chair for pointing it out.
Yes, sir.
Why wouldn't that be true for all our charter school students? I mean, if we can't put what we need for charter school students in our budget, because then they would get money again for the local funds that we're putting in our budget to pay them for what,
To the extent that the expense for, if there's a child that's in our schools and moves to a charter, then the charter now incurs expense to teach that child. And I think most of us would understand that there has to be a reconciliation of the revenue following that child. Now, it's always a year late, and sometimes they go back and forth, and that gets into a complicated conversation. But I think logically, when a child goes to the charters, the same way that if I were Wes Grainer, I would expect for the local contribution to follow that child to Stars Charter School. Well, likewise, if there's a child that enrolls there that's never in our schools, there's never an accounting for the expense of that child. There is, under the current means by which we have local funding for charter school children, there's no accounting for that expense. The charter school incurs that expense with the people that they hire. When that child comes to our school, there's no reciprocal following of any local dollars of that child coming our way. It's all we give and they receive. It doesn't work the other way. And so by setting up a separate charter fund that accounts for the children that have never been accounted for, then that money is established, and then that becomes what follows that. If that child should later leave and come to us, that money follows that child to Moore County schools and accounts for that expense.
Well, can we put anything in our budget that would account for charter schools?
Well, we have to.
I mean, our operating budget.
We have no choice but to do that. That's the problem. What's not accounted for is there's no new revenue coming in to cover the expense related to the children who never come to Moore County schools. When we present our budget and we look at the number of teachers we need, we base that on the number of children that are in our school. We don't include the charter school teachers that are educating the children who never came to our school. Those dollars have never been accounted for in the Moore County Schools budget, and they still are not accounted for. So when you see this is just a pulling money away from the children in the traditional public schools, giving it to the charters, and we have nothing to say about that.
So we do our staffing, though, based on what it would be.
The children in our building, yeah.
But I mean, when we do our staffing, we do it for more than our kids if we know that we're going to end up paying money to kids with the charter school.
There's no way to do that, and the state establishes an amount of money, which is the local per pupil expense. So that is the number of dollars. If we came up with a number above or below that, it wouldn't be relevant because the state looks only at that local per pupil expense. Of course, the state dollars are going to flow one way or another, and as far as the state is concerned, they account for the state cost of educating children in charters. That money is all taken care of by the state. I've been proposing now, going on 4 years, a plan that would provide similar coverage for the local expense of those children, and to date, we've not been able to make much progress on that.
That's the only solution to not, okay, thanks.
And it would need to be over and above existing expense for existing students.
I agree.
It should not be counted in the percentage of revenue afforded to the public schools because those children have never been in our schools. And again, I'm talking about the children that have never attended the traditional public schools. They've gone straight to the charters and they've remained there.
And if I recall, you estimated at our budget work session that was about $1 million worth.
1.1,
Is that right?
about just under $1.1 million. Right?
As a totally separate line item.
Yes. The estimate for next year is that it'll be closer to $2 million that we'll pay to charters for those students, which represents about 7% of our local budget. So it is a valid concern and a valid request to get some kind of funding model that the board and the county could adjust to.
And this would be a good year to do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, we're going to talk some more about that next week, Madam
Yes,
Chair,
okay.
if we
I'm
could.
sorry to jump the gun here. Let's move on. Anything else? Any questions on that?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Powers?
Crazy.
The district has received a request to consider naming the Union Pines High School greenhouse for Mr. Zach McNeil. The request comes from the Union Pines High School faculty and staff, as well as the Future Farmers of America Alumni Association at Union Pines High School, and they make that request in memory of Mr. McNeil. Mr. McNeil was an agricultural teacher at Union Pines High School from 2014 through 2016. Before being tragically killed in an automobile accident in June of 2016. He was a young and dedicated teacher, instrumental in rekindling an FFA program that had become stagnant prior to his arrival. It was Mr. McNeil's vision and desire for Union Pines to have a new functional agricultural greenhouse to assist in growing the horticultural program. Although the funding was approved prior to his death, Mr. McNeil never saw his vision become reality when a new greenhouse was completed in the summer of 2017. Mr. McNeil was both a loved and respected by both students and colleagues, and the naming of the Union Pines greenhouse in his memory would document his critical role in attaining the new greenhouse and the growth of the Union Pines FFA program. Obviously, Mr. McNeil's service warrants, and particularly at Union Pines High School, warrants further study of community support for this request. Therefore, we request the school board's authorization to seek community input regarding this proposal. We would do that through inviting community members to send their feedback to Mr. McCormick, Andy McCormick, the principal at Union Pines High School, either through mail or through email. We would also open a portal on our district website to allow parents to provide their feedback in that form as well. And then we would also hold a community forum at Union Pines High School on February 19th at 6:30 p.m. In the cafeteria to allow community members to also come out in person and express their feedback regarding this proposal. If we will plan to report the findings of the feedback gathering at the March 4th, 2019 work session. If the district staff determines that the request is based on sufficient community support, then Dr. Grimsey will provide the school board with a formal recommendation during the board's regular business meeting on March 11th. And that completes my summary of that. Be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Feels like a very meaningful recognition for him. Can you remind me what the process is for those who want to name a facility or a portion of a facility, if they're coming from the community and not coming from within the school? What is the process? Not related to this, but
Sure.
for others.
Anyone who wanted to propose that would need to send a letter in writing to Dr. Grimsey. And then from there, we would take that. We would follow board policy 7550 for naming facilities, which would mean next steps would be, having conversation with the principal at the school and bringing that recommendation before the school board to first seek community input.
Great. So you have a date already scheduled for this one?
We have one scheduled, yeah.
Wonderful. Any questions, comments? All right.
Okay.
Next item?
Yes, Dr. Powers,
Yes,
keep rolling.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Out-of-state field trips.
Two out-of-state field trips for your consideration this month. Both are from Pinecrest High School. The first involves their request for qualifying members of the speech and debate team to be allowed to travel to Cambridge, Massachusetts to compete in the Harvard Speech and Debate National Tournament. Pinecrest has students every year that do qualify and have participated in the past in this tournament. The trip is planned soon for February 15th through 18th, so that's the first for consideration. The second, also from Pinecrest, 4 U.S. history and world history classes are requesting their students be allowed to travel to Washington, D.C. for the purposes of touring national monuments, memorials, and museums. The visit will include the Holocaust Museum, all war memorials, Smithsonian Museum, American History Museum, Arlington National Cemetery, and the trip and activities align with the goals found in both the U.S. history and world history curriculums. And that trip would be planned for May 24th through the 27th, which is over the Memorial Day holiday weekend.
As much as I've complained about the forms, I did note there's a line for accommodations.
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Yes,
and I'm
we
glad that
know
you
where they're
noticed that.
staying.
We have those, we do.
And my compliments to you for getting that added.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think the history trip especially sounds exciting for our students to live so close to Washington, D.C., but to know so many of them have not ever been there
Right.
and may not ever go there without this opportunity. It's really great.
Any questions, board members? Thank you, Dr. Powers. Madam Chair, we have a preliminary draft of your meeting agenda for February 11th. The administration awaits the board's guidance as to what, if any, items you'd like to assign to your consent agenda. I will remind you that item 2A contains 2 motions. That doesn't prohibit you from putting it on consent agenda, but if you do, be advised that any action would involve 2 motions.
Any
In other words,
thoughts?
they would both be accommodated by the consent.
So if we look at items A through I, which one of those should be on the consent agenda? And are there any we should pull
Or
off
to
for
put it
action?
easier.
Yeah,
Which
let's
should
go
be on
the other
action?
way.
Probably be easier to
Which
say
should be
which
on
ones you want to
action?
have school board action.
I think
Okay.
all should be consent. I'm good with that.
I'm good with consent.
Consent.
A or all consent?
I mean, all we're doing is approving the framework to
Yeah.
do the assignment. We're not approving student assignments. So
Right.
it's just approving a calendar, basically.
Any benefit for having one last, we like the principles?
For one last what?
That we like the principles, the guiding principles?
Oh.
We like the school principals and the guidance.
I don't,
I don't want our principals to think you don't like them.
I don't think we need to have
I'm
Mike
with
and Laura
consent for
come
all of
back.
it.
I don't think we need that.
Okay,
I believe it can all be consent.
Yeah, same here.
all right,
Any
sound good for
dissent
everybody?
to consent?
Yeah, any dissent to
No
consent?
dissent to consent? Okay.
Consent to consent.
Okay,
The administration will act accordingly. Madam Chair, we move on to Section 3. Do you want to continue on, or do you want to take a break?
Continue.
let's continue.
Continue on at this
Oh.
time. I'll invite Dr. Metcalf to pick
ready.
up where Mr. Dennison, or Mr. Cunningham left off.
Yes, I appreciate that introduction, Mr. Cunningham. I wanted to give you an update. On where we're at with the 2020-21 school calendar. As you know, we took a very traditional school calendar out online for public feedback. We did that between December 11th and January 10th and have received that feedback. But during that time, we became aware of a very unique, innovative, year-round school calendar that some different districts were using. It meets many of your advocacy points, and so we want to take a closer look at it. For example, it aligns closely to the community college's schedule. It allows for assessments, testing to be done before Christmas break, some of the things that you've been advocating for. And so we brought it to the calendar committee just this past week, and they have recommended, very excited about it, and they had recommended we take it a little further, get a little bit more input. So our plan is to take that to both our district level advisory council, as our teacher advisory council, our student advisory council, parent advisory councils, as well as school-based advisory councils, try to get as much input back from them as we possibly can. And then we'll bring forward a recommendation. That recommendation may be to put it back out for further comment online, back out to a wider, broader community to get some input. The good thing is we're still almost a year and a half ahead of the schedule when we're required to post a calendar for 2020-21. So we've got plenty of time, although, of course, we'll work very swiftly to bring you a recommendation.
That's just a report, no action.
That's just a report.
Does
Any questions?
anybody have any questions or anything that, earlier it sounded like you had made some observations about other calendars. Mr. Cunningham, anything to add?
Just that my favorite scene in Indiana Jones is when he's in the marketplace and the guy jumps out with the nunchucks and is waving them around all over the place, and he just takes out a pistol and shoots them, you know? So if the resolution is ineffective, I'm with Indiana Jones. We do it.
Another way.
We of course would take some time to, would take some time to get out in the community
Get some
and
real public
explain it.
input.
But what we found from other communities, we tend to approve our calendar 2 years in advance. So we move much more methodically because the standard in our community from our parents that we plan ahead is higher than some other communities. But I will tell you, there are a lot of school districts as we speak that are moving as rapidly as possible to this calendar for next year. I mean, they're doing that here in February because of the opportunity to respond to a number of complaints we've heard for years about our calendar. But right now, we've not put this out to the community, so we'd like to hear from our own people in time. Calendar committee, quite enthusiastic.
Very
Mr.
excited.
Dennison, I'm sorry, you want to say
Oh,
something?
no, I was just going to say, I will still pursue
Yes.
the calendar date because, you know, the legislation can make decisions fast to do stuff and want to have solid, no matter.
Well, And I
no
think
matter
it's
what.
good to have a plan in place if we are able to do this, that there is a plan in place that's looking at the community college start dates, it's looking at having final exams before Christmas, before the holidays. I mean, I think there's some real benefits to seeing whichever comes first, whichever way is allowed, that we've explored the possibilities and gotten input from the community. So it's good to look at this and see what people say.
And knowing it's not gonna come into effect until 2020.
That's right.
We're providing a little deference to families who've already planned summer vacations for this year, based on our current calendar, so
Absolutely.
it works well.
When does the community college start? In the middle of August?
About August 17th or so, yeah.
Usually 15th, somewhere in there.
There are no requirements by statute when the community colleges start. They make their decision, they let them know when they're going to start and when they're going to end. So you can't set a date. I mean, if we tried to put something in a resolution on a specific date, we couldn't do it because the dates for the community college starting and stopping may change.
Well, the other part, too, is that by having exams in January for the high school students, some of them are trying to start community college, which again starts about the 7th to the 10th of January. And if we continue with exams in the latter part of January right now for seniors, then they have some difficulty getting into. We're fortunate that our community college here will work with our students to allow them temporary admissions, but there are a lot that don't.
Well, working on the other end too, community college starts a week before we do, so we have over 800 students that are taking courses there, and probably say half of them take. So we have 400 students that have started community college a week before we start.
And transportation becomes a problem because
Right.
we're not running that bus during that time because we're not in session.
We can also be grateful to our high school teachers and testing coordinators who have to go ahead and give exams for those graduating students before Christmas. Because not only do they go on to the community college, they go on to universities, especially some of our athletes. And there's a lot of special provisions that have to be made to get those exams in before Christmas. So we appreciate the extra effort that takes from teachers and testers.
Solves a
Let me-
lot of problems, so it's,
Let me reiterate for Dr. Metcalf, I'd step down for just a minute. This isn't just about aligning with community colleges and testing and grading and things that pertain to the adult world. This just has to do with, we've also gotten feedback that this is just good for children. There's a lot of opportunities here for our students and of all ages and our teachers as well, and is worthy of our further consideration. And so it's not, those are the obvious attractions, but I think there's also some other benefits that the calendar committee has picked up. So we look forward to exploring that and bring it back to you.
Yeah, I didn't even know this was being done until about 2 weeks ago. So.
Yeah, and I just learned myself right before Christmas. It was the first time I was exposed to this approach and what the opportunity is under the existing statute to consider this. As long as we're looking at a legitimate year-round model, but there isn't a lot of real specific definition on what year-round is. So there's some options there we can look at that I think a lot of our parents are going to be really intrigued by. So we'll see. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, our last report is Ms. Jan Lovelady, who has some friends with her. Where's Ms. Lovelady? Here she comes. Okay, come on forward, Ms. Lovelady, and Ms. Murphy, are you joining her too?
I'm going to join her, and then we also have
Got Jenny Purvis, principal of Northmore High School, and Stephanie Phillips, principal of Pinecrest High School. Is that our complete panel?
Mr. McCormick had a court section he had to go through.
Oh, my goodness, was he speeding again? Okay, all right.
I
Thank
shouldn't
you.
talk about speeding.
Okay, Jan, procedures for managing student child nutrition debt.
Good afternoon. I want to start by telling you a little bit about child nutrition programs so that you can get an understanding of where we're starting from. During World War I and the Great Depression, this caused greater attention to be focused on meeting the nutritional needs of children. And as a result, the National School Lunch Act was implemented in 1946 to support defense, education, health, nutrition, and agriculture. Child nutrition programs are regulated by the federal government. the Office of Management and Budget publishes a super circular which includes the policies and procedures for implementing the program. 2 CFR 200 is in reference to uniform guidance for all programs using federal funds. The purpose is to ease administrative burdens and strengthen oversight over federal funds to reduce the risks of waste, fraud, and abuse. 7 CFR 210 contains the regulations governing child nutrition programs, and it specifies the responsibilities of state and local officials in the areas of program administration, preparation and service of nutritious lunches, the sale of competitive foods, payment of funds, use of program funds, program monitoring and reporting, and record-keeping requirements. And finally, 7 CFR 245 governs the determination of eligibility for free and reduced price meals. And there are 2 areas addressed in this policy. They are the responsibilities of state agencies and school food authorities with respect to the establishment of income guidelines and determination of eligibility of children for free and reduced price meals, and for assuring that there is no physical segregation of or other discrimination against or overt identification of children that qualify for free and reduced meals. So we can't verbally or by action identify a free and reduced student to anyone other than the family. Child nutrition programs are enterprise funds, which means they are supposed to be self-supporting. Our income sources are federal reimbursement, which you can see the list up there. The star is for breakfasts that are designated as severe need, and that's defined as schools at which 40% or more of lunches are being served to needy students. So 21 of our 23 schools are designated as severe need. We also receive payments for full paid and reduced price meals, and we receive payment for sale of supplemental items. And those funds that we receive must cover all the expenses of the program, and this includes food, supplies, employees' wages and benefits, equipment costs, maintenance, and all the other expenses that you don't think about on a daily basis. As each student comes into Moore County Schools and is enrolled, they receive a lunch account. This allows the child nutrition program to track transactions back to specific students, and it also allows parents the ability to track transactions and prepay for meals. They can make payments on accounts by cash or check to the school cafeteria. They can also make payments on accounts by credit or debit card payments at the K-12 payment center. Parents can contact the child nutrition office for student information and balances, or they can enroll in the K-12 payment center and get balance information, transaction history, and make payments. A little bit of information about the K-12 payment center itself. When you first sign up, they are a third-party vendor, so there are fees for some items. There is a small fee if you make payments on K-12. That is primarily to cover credit card fees and handling by the third-party vendor, but there are free things available. Parents can view student balances, their history of transactions, and they can also set up low balance notifications that can be sent either by email or text or both. When students are initially added to an account, their prior history and current balances cannot be accessed. So this is actually my account. I had never checked it on K-12 Payment Center. And at the time I set up the account, I had a $2 credit balance on my account, but is not showing up because that was prior to my sign up.
So for parents that may not have access at home, how would they go about enrolling their students?
Really, you have to have access to a computer to really be able to utilize the K-12 Payment Center. I guess you could do that at a local library. You can do it on a smartphone, on a home computer. Without access to those things, we are happy to answer any questions from any parent. Before K-12 payment came along, and even now, If a parent calls and wants information, we're happy to either mail or email a child's history. If they sign up for K-12 and want to see the prior history, we're happy to email or mail that to them so that they can see exactly what has transpired on their child's account.
So is there like a phone app or?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
You can pay it on your phone. You can pull up the K-12 payment site on your phone and pay it that way.
Okay.
May I ask a question real quick? When you mentioned prior history, does that mean if my child is in 9th grade, I can go back and look and see? Well, I don't know exactly when this started, but
Right.
let's say I have a 2nd grader now and we've had it for 2 years.
Right.
I could go back and look and see how often my child has been eating lunch.
Yes, but that you would have to call our office and have us send it to you, because the history that you see will start on the date that you enroll that child in the K-12 payment center under your account.
But for instance, okay, when I enter my kindergartner
Right.
in another year,
Right.
and I sign them up, I'll be able to then follow them the whole way through.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
thinking of being able, for our purposes, being able to track students who never do eat in our cafeterias, and maybe are slipping through the cracks. They're not qualifying for free and reduced lunch, but they don't have the money to purchase a lunch in the
Right.
cafeteria. Is there a way to look at what their record of consumption has been? But their parents would have had to have signed up,
Yeah, their
right?
parents would have had to have signed up, and there would have to be a history to track. If there's nothing there, then, I mean, if they had a history and then they dropped off, then you could see that they dropped off and might be able to go back and check and see why that happened. But we can only track what's there, so only when meals are purchased or payments are made, is there anything, as far as history transactions on there. Now, from the standpoint of, we have had the same Meals Plus system. I want to say the current system we've had for at least 5 years, so we could go back at least 5 years on all the students' accounts through our office and see what transactions were made over that period of time. So when you sign up a student, of course, it doesn't show anything. So the first time it will allow you to see a current balance or transaction history is when a transaction is made, either a payment or a purchase. And then that will show up on the child's account. So I actually had one of my coworkers go on and so that I could show what it looks like when you actually have children. You have the choice of making a payment, and it shows what the current balance is of each child at that point, and it gives you a chance also to click and look at their transaction history, and this is what a transaction history would look like. Okay. And then we had talked, I had mentioned that there's an ability to set up low balance notifications. If you go into Manage Profile and scroll down to the low balance notification section, you're able to set up notification for amount of your choosing. So if you want to get the notice when your child has $20 still on the account or $10 still on the account, you can choose what that number is, and then the notification can be sent in the form of an email, a text, or both.
I'm going to notice that 2 years ago we signed up for the K-12 Payment Center ourselves, and we love it because it's great to see, you know, how is it that you're out of money already?
Yes.
And you see all the snacks they've eaten. Or, but the one thing that we hadn't done, which I noticed, is that you have to actually check that box to be able to opt into the low balance notification. Right. It was a whole new world opened up for us, our family. So now we get these text messages. And I don't know if there's anything you can do because this is a software that you pay for and it's already designed. Right. But if there's any way to make that an opt-in versus, or no, an opt-out versus an opt-in, you'd probably benefit a lot of families. But it's not your software, so I don't know if you can ask them to do that. But
actually, we could put in a request.
As long as it doesn't cost anything. But
it
would be so nice. It would be so nice to have that automatic for those of us
Yeah.
who just need help.
That is
in
definitely
remembering
a
to
suggestion that we can put in
load the account.
and see we have found that generally, if they have the suggestion from several different counties, then often we can get changes made more easily than if it's just coming from one source.
Yeah.
So if I can pass that around to other directors, I may be able to encourage other people to put in that suggestion, and then maybe with
Well, and even me, by just saying it here, I hope people will now take a look at their signups and go check that box, because it's very helpful from a parent perspective
it is.
to do
I
that.
mean, I wish that I had had that when my daughter was
Oh, yeah.
in high school. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about participation and demographics. Last school year, we served 334,680 breakfast meals and 983,137 lunch meals. For breakfast, we must offer a minimum of 2 whole grains or 1 whole grain and 1 protein, 1 cup of fruit or fruit juice, vegetables may be substituted, and 8 ounces of milk. For lunch at the elementary and middle school level, we must offer a minimum of 2 ounces of meat or meat alternate, 1 day per week, that can be 1 ounce. 2 grain servings, again, 1 day per week, that may be 1 ounce. 3/4 cup of vegetable, 1/2 cup of fruit, and 8 ounces of milk. At the high school, the minimums are 2 ounces of meat or meat alternate, 2 grain servings, 1 cup of vegetables, 1 cup of fruit, and 8 ounces of milk. And that's where you come up with the difference between the price of your elementary and middle school meal versus your high school meal. Demographics for last year, the 2017-2018 free and reduced percentage was 41.94%. This year, it's actually a little bit lower than that. We also offered universal free breakfast, which means the breakfast was free to all students at Aberdeen Primary, Aberdeen Elementary, Robbins Elementary, and Elise Middle School, which are our highest needs schools. We've had many families moving to Moore County that have commented that they didn't have to pay for lunch in their prior district and did not have to apply for free or reduced price meals. And schools that are part of the National School Lunch Program have the ability to offer this through the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP. What is CEP? In this, all students eat free regardless of meal status. The federal reimbursement is still based on meal status, however, and that information is gathered during the initiating year of the CEP. Local funds are used to pay any difference, and the state and federal research has shown that a free and reduced price percentage of 67% or higher is optimal for ensuring that local funds are not overburdened. And just to give you an idea of what that might cost, during October, we were able to offer free meals to all students through the disaster relief program, and we actually received an additional $200,000 in reimbursement from the federal government, which shows that if we were offering free lunch to all students, it would cost local funds approximately $150,000 to $200,000 a month.
So there wasn't a huge increase when it was
There was a
free.
huge increase in participation.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yes.
How were those 4 elementary schools, or were they all elementary schools? Yeah,
Elise
one
Middle
middle.
School was-
How are they paying for the free breakfast?
Because their free and reduced percentage is so high, and the number of paid kids that are eating, it's found that it's sufficient to cover the little bit of cost that is the difference.
Breakfast is not that expensive, it looked like.
It's not, yeah, when you look at the scheme of things, I want to say Robbins has something like an 87 to 90% free and reduced percentage. So when you're talking, only 10% of the kids are full pay, and honestly, we receive more money for a free breakfast and a free lunch than we do for a reduced breakfast or a reduced lunch. We're able to cover the difference with those funds.
And many of that 10% is probably eating at home
A lot of them are, yeah,
compared to the
yeah.
other half.
Mhm. So we'll talk a little bit about free and reduced price meal applications. Families that received FNS benefits automatically automatically qualify for free meal benefits. If their information on file at the Department of Social Services doesn't match the information that we have in Power School, they may still need to fill out a free and reduced price meal application and write their case number on it. Sometimes the address is not correct, sometimes the Social Security number, it's not the same between the two systems, and so it doesn't automatically pull over when we do a download. Foster children also automatically qualify for free meals, and students that are deemed homeless by Moore County School social workers also automatically qualify. So if you don't qualify under those bases, then families need to apply with a free and reduced application, and that is based on a combination of income and family size. And I can give you an example. A family of 4 making less than $3,870 monthly would qualify for either free or reduced benefits. So where do they get the free and reduced applications? They are distributed to families in each student's back-to-school packet. Staff that meet one-on-one with families prior to the start of school are also provided with applications, and applications are made available to families at any time during the school year. One way is reminder letters are sent to families that qualified in the previous year that have not applied yet. We send them 2 reminders that they qualified last year, but we haven't heard from them this year, and in that we send them another form. So they receive 2 additional forms before, or one before the deadline and one after the deadline, letting them know. They can also contact the Child Nutrition Office to receive an application by mail, or they can pick up an application at any school site. They are not currently available online. There's very strict security of student and family data, and that must be maintained, and we have to demonstrate the protection of that data before we can begin using an online form.
And am I correct in understanding that it only takes one application to cover numerous children in
Yes,
school?
it is
So
a family
whether you have one child or
application.
5,
Right.
one
It is
application.
a family application. And getting the word out about that is a great thing because we often get multiple applications from the same family. Some of them are exact duplicates with all of the children listed on the application. Some of them are one child on each application. And because it is based on family size as well as income, if they're only putting that one child, they may not qualify with that income and only 2 people living in the household. But if they listed all their children, they might qualify if they had 4 people in the household at that income.
I'm curious because the principals are here, so I feel like I need to ask you a question. How is it that, for those that you know that should be or you think should be filling them out, what kinds of things are you doing to try to reach out to them to fill it out? Or why do you think they're not filling it out?
We constantly remind our cafeteria folks, hand those out. We hand them out in the office. Our guidance counselors give them out. Sometimes it's just a breakdown in the family getting it completed and getting it back. Sometimes they don't get home. If we know that a kid should be qualifying for free and reduced, then our counselors or social worker will reach out to the parent and just say, we know you filled this out before. Would you please fill it out again? Are you interested in filling it out again? And sometimes that works, but we do offer them year-round.
Rely heavily on the social workers. But it's been my experience too that pride comes into play with some families. And they're just not going to apply. Even students we know, just because we know the family situations and the dynamics, and social workers bring them in, we bring them in. The families they're not going to do it.
But you're providing a lot of opportunities, it sounds
Yes.
like.
Or
Yeah.
parents are very willing to do it, and the students don't want to have their peers know that they qualify.
So,
So the pride is on the student side,
Well,
not,
we
not
have students
so much.
that are approved for free and reduced lunch, and they will not go through the line and
Oh,
give their
yeah.
lunch number.
yeah. And so for those students, what are they eating, or they're missing meals, or how, what are we
Some
doing?
miss meals if
So
they
they're-
don't go through the line, you know, because there's no other way to, unless, you know, we have a food pantry at school. And so we do have students who will come up, for various reasons, because, sometimes our students eat breakfast or lunch and they're still hungry, especially if it's a Monday. You'll have a couple kids who will wanna come up and get something out of the pantry. And then we have other kids who didn't go through the lunch line, but will come through and, you know, talk to our counselors and get something out of the food pantry. We always see a dip too, or we do at our high school, in the percentage of free and reduced as compared to middle feeder schools. High school is a lot worse about trying to get qualified and taking advantage of that. And we've actually found with several students that they do qualify because, you know, their whole family was on one application. But like Andy said, the kid's not maybe taking advantage of it for one reason or another at high school.
I will say they use a keypad now, and so that's taken away some of the having to give out loud a number, and it's slid up under there, and the kid just puts their hand under the
That's
counter
great.
and types in their number,
Yeah.
and they roll on.
That's
and so
great.
that's helped a little with the pride piece of it. So.
The K-12, the app, the softwares also help, because a lot of paid students have money on their account. So they're going through as well, just giving their lunch number, and, you know, it used to be that everybody's handing out money. And so now, most of the kids are not handing out money.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah, it's all numbers.
Yeah.
So the process basically is the same at each high school? Okay.
And I think that's one of the things that hurts my heart, is that people have that fear of others finding out that they need help. And so they either don't want to fill out the form, or even worse, we've had parents that have come through the direct certification utility. We found out that because they're on food stamps, they automatically qualify, and they actually call and say, take my child off of that. We don't want the free meals. And it's because they feel that somehow somebody is going to know. But in this day and age of computers, you cannot tell the difference between a free child and a child that has $100 on their account. I mean, there's just no way to know. And so I think the message needs to get out there that to not have that fear. You don't have to turn in the free and reduced form at the school. You can mail it to our office, and nobody at the school will ever know that you filled it out.
So is there any type of confidentiality statement
Yes.
or clause on the form?
We are
regard to
not
what you-
allowed to tell anyone who the free and reduced students is. Our cafeteria workers, it does not come up on their screen when the child's
'Cause they just give a
picture.
number, and it
They
could be a
just give
paid child
number,
or a
so,
free and reduced
yeah,
child, right?
Exactly.
They're
And
not
you know
even
what?
allowed, they're not even allowed to provide that
We
data
don't
to us.
No.
Is there a way that you can just not even at some point take money, and versus everything has to be paid early or online, so the kid is not actually handing money to make that, especially for high school? I mean, I don't really see it in elementary,
Processing fee
but
with the K-12 payment site, I
Is
think
what's
would make
killing
that a
them?
little
It's-
difficult,
yeah.
because you do have to pay a fee.
yeah, it's like $2 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's $1.95 no matter how much you put on. So for a reduced student where the parent did not need to put that much on the account,
Would be more than,
$1.95 is a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I know
Yeah.
parents just submit checks to the front office, and then that
Right.
takes care of it. You don't need to bring cash when you
Cash.
pay. I
Right.
mean, there's lots of ways to do that.
Right.
When you send a check to the front office, is that then input that's on the child's account? So does the school absorb
If
the cost of
there's-
putting that in?
If there is a check brought to the front office, then it's just brought down to the cafeteria and it's put on the child's account. There is no fee for that.
Because you could do that with, I mean, if somebody wanted to bring in cash,
Yeah.
then, yeah, that would be credited the same way, right?
Right.
And I know many families who don't want to pay the fee.
$1.95.
I do,
Right.
because of convenience,
And that's
but
understandable.
that's,
I do that
it's
too.
up to,
The
it's up to
laziness.
a parent. There are other options, but you can still get all this great information on there. if you
Yeah.
do,
Exactly.
For those that are paying, but.
Yeah.
But the point that we're trying to make is that those that are paying and those that are on free and reduced lunch, nobody knows who's who
No
because
one
everybody
knows.
enters a
No.
number.
Right. No, we are
Except for
not.
the occasional person who wants to buy
Right.
lunch that day and they bring cash because
Right.
it's Pizza Friday or something.
Exactly.
So when a child comes through the line and punches in their number and it shows up that they are at zero balance, does that immediately generate an email or a text or something to a parent saying you've bottomed out?
No.
If they opt in.
They have to opt in, remember? And they have to
Right,
set the
right.
limit.
Well, that's part of the presentation later if you'd like.
Okay,
to
we'll
have
keep
it.
going, we'll keep going, we'll keep
And
going,
now
sorry.
maybe
to-
We've been doing that a lot today.
As we go through the process, yeah.
Why is it a work session?
Yeah.
I just want to add before we go on, I remember giving out the free lunch forms in homeroom, and the number of papers that are left on the desk or are dropped in the trash can as students leave the room is phenomenal. You know, and we would do it day after day after day. So I know the attempts are being made.
Right.
And I know the teachers are at the front of the classroom saying, if you've got one of those, drop it in a basket on my desk. You know, they're very discreet about it. They're not drawing attention to kids. And especially at the beginning of the year when they're bringing back all kinds of forms,
Right.
it can all come in together.
Right.
And there's no distinction made as to what you've handed in.
Exactly.
But those high school kids are a tough sale.
We do things like, we have a stack in the student union on the stool. They could grab one as they go to the bus. There's a stack on the library counter. And we just put them all around school, just a stack of them. So you could grab one at any point in time. You don't have to ask for it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about student debt. Over the past 4 years, student debt has averaged just under $20,000 per year, and you can see each year listed there. And as great as these sums seem, they're an improvement over prior years. In 2014, there was a $32,893 deficit in student debt, and in 2013, it was $28,507. So it has improved, but it's still a lot of money. And this has to be paid out of local funds. Child nutrition programs are not allowed to hold debt at the end of the school year. Child nutrition assists with current school year debt by weekly notification to parents of balances greater than $10. There's a Blackboard Connect phone call and an email that go out each week. On the email, it encourages families that think that they qualify for free and reduced meals to please pick up a free and reduced form either at the school or call our office to receive one. It doesn't give that information in the phone calls because we found the phone call needs to be short, to the point, this is how much your child owes, and go on. There's also monthly engagement with principals and school personnel via reports of all student balances that are greater than $10. And we also provide letters to be sent home with these students to notify parents of the debt.
I'm sorry, where it says balances, that means overdue balance, correct?
Yes, negative balance.
And the reason it can be more than 10 is because of our elementary and middle school students who are
Correct.
always fed.
Yes.
And I've gotten one of those phone calls before I saw the checkbox on the K-12, so I know they work.
Yes.
I'm embarrassed about that, but
Yeah, and it's surprising. I mean, when I leave, Lisa Brewer, our office manager, is the one that actually has recorded the Connect Ed call. And so I tell her that you're making 453 calls tonight. So it's a lot. It's a lot. End of the school year procedures, we send a list of the students and the amount that is owed to finance and to the school sites, and invoices are sent to finance and or the school sites for what is owed at the end of the year. The school procedure at the end of the school year is that school personnel enter the debt information into the students' Power School accounts, and there's continued attempts to collect that debt before the child leaves Moore County schools.
Can you withhold anything as far as like a report card, a dance?
Graduation.
I'm not, I'm not sure where the exact limit on that is.
Jan,
but
why don't you
can-
defer to the principals on that one?
Okay.
Yeah.
We require that all fees be paid before graduation, and prom, and getting your permit, your driver's permit, all of those big items like that.
But is that in the policy, or is that just your discretion?
I think policy states anything over
Yes.
$25.
Right. The problem comes in, when they carry a balance, and we carry it year to year. You have a ninth grade balance, you have a 10th grade
Yeah.
balance. And they don't fill out a free and reduced form, so we have a large balance. Well, what happens when you fill out a free and reduced form and then you get approved is that you qualify for a waiver of all your fees in Power School, with the exception of your graduation fee. So if we've carried these balances forward, the school's incurred the cost at the end of each year. It's on the student's account, but when they figure out, I've got to pay this to go to 11th grade prom or get my license, the only way to get your fees waived is to have your free or reduced lunch form. That helps us know if you're getting half your fees waived or if they're all waived. Well, that will get filled out, and then it's all waived. So the school still doesn't get recoup the funds, if that
Right.
makes sense. So, initially you think, well, putting it on Power School means we're gonna get it.
You already ate it, yeah.
The only money you would get back then would be from students who actually are capable of paying it.
Correct.
And they want to go to prom and have been neglectful and whatever.
Or those students who never fill out the form. They pay it instead of filling out the form.
And with Power School, it doesn't do any good to hold report cards now because they have immediate.
Right, well, that's what I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah, I believe at the elementary and middle school level, some schools are withholding extracurricular activities also to try and keep those balances in line. I do too. 'Cause it's not the student's fault.
Yeah, I don't know that elementary schools are withholding extracurricular activities. I question that. Mr. Metcalf, Dr.
Not at
Metcalf?
the elementary school, middle schools do, however.
Yeah, middle school, but not
Okay.
at the elementary
Things like
level.
dances, not athletics per se.
Right.
Things like dances,
Dances.
they would, at the middle school level.
Correct, but not at the elementary level.
Correct.
Okay, so the meal charge procedures, at the elementary and middle schools, meals are served to students regardless of student debt. That does not include snacks and supplemental sales items. These are not permitted to be charged at any grade level. So that's just the lunch itself. At the high schools, there's a no charge procedure that is implemented, but consideration is given for forgotten funds. Students are allowed to charge up to 2 meals, so the maximum for paid students is $5.50, and the maximum for reduced students is 80 cents. Again, snacks and supplemental sale items are not permitted to be charged. So the procedure for withholding meals is that at the first charge, the cashier informs the student that the meal was charged and that they or their parent needs to provide funds. At the second charge, the cashier reminds the students that funds are due and that this is the last meal that can be charged. And then at the third attempted charge, the student is told that they're not able to charge another meal and the tray is set aside until the student returns with payment.
Can I ask a question on the procedure? So the student comes to the counter and they punch in a code. So how does what shows up then for the cashier to know that it's been rejected?
They have to press the button for lunch, and then it shows what the current charge is. And it shows up in red so that they know this is the first charge. And then the second day, similar happens. On the third attempt, when it's going to go over the 2-meal limit, the computer will actually not allow it to process the transaction at all.
So that's what the cashier sees, not the student at the keypad.
Correct.
But other students are not seeing this on the cashier's
Correct, yes, because
register.
the cashier's register is usually at an angle away from students. Okay. The procedure for tray discard is if the student does not return to retrieve the held tray by the end of the meal period, unsealed food is able to be returned to the serving line, or sealed food, excuse me, and unsealed food is discarded. And the food is never discarded in front of students. In most cases, they wait until after the meal period. The doors are usually typically closed at that point while they set up for the next group, and that's when the discard of the food would actually occur.
And if a student has a question or a problem with that, who do they go to if they find that they have a?
At Pinecrest, I have the same assistant principal in all lunches. So
Okay.
Mr. Smith stays in the cafeteria, and he keeps pretty much a mental list of all the students he's been dealing with on an ongoing basis. And so the cafeteria ladies always come out and get Mr. Smith, and then he engages as well. So it's not just on the cafeteria, the ladies that work in the cafeteria to have to deal with that situation.
So, all right, a student comes in, they had their 2 meals that they charged, and they come up and put the third one in, and it shows up on the cafeteria, that red line. So then the student has a tray there. What happens?
The cafeteria cashier takes the tray and sets it on the counter to the side of the computer and asks the child to please provide funds for the meal. And I will say about half of them do come back with money, either
I
from
should defer to
friends
the
or-
principals again.
They'll come back, our cafeteria ladies will ask them to, or go find some money for the meal, or go see an administrator, and we have I pull cafeteria duty every day, so we have administrators in there, and they'll come to us, and a lot of times if we'll pull the money out of our pocket, or we'll just walk up there and sign off to please go ahead and charge the student, but then as soon as lunch is over, we go make a parental contact.
At Northmore, our cafeteria ladies let them know you need to either borrow money from a friend or go to the office and borrow money. The reason we have them come to the office is because then we can keep track of who owes money. But they're instructed they can borrow from a friend or go to the office and borrow money and come back.
And also, since we really put a focus on this, our cafeteria manager will send me an email. If a student does not come back and pick their tray up or come back with an administrator's signature, they'll send us an email letting us know that this happened with this student. So one of us can follow up, or the social worker can follow up. And a lot of times, it's the parent forgot to put money back in the account or something along those lines. Right. Right. Or the child got the money and spent it on something else, or so.
And how long is a lunch period?
25 minutes for us.
30.
So they gotta move pretty quickly if they've stood in line a few minutes and then realize they have no funds and then have to go to an office or find a principal, especially if they have to leave the.
Usually over about 15 minutes into lunch. So they have about 15 minutes. If you're the last person in line, you'd still have about 15 minutes.
Do you find that a lot of students don't return? If they've had that experience, do they just not return to the line?
It might be 1 or 2 a lunch period, third period, maybe a day.
That have run into the.
That just
couldn't
leave it
get
and don't
funds
come
and
back at all.
Don't come back.
Yeah.
We have very few trays set aside. Our kids usually bring money or borrow money from the office or a friend. And I don't know if you know the numbers, but I don't think we've had any trays set aside, especially since the 2 lunch charges.
I did talk to Pam, the manager at Northmore, and she said that since January, there have not been any. Okay, we've had requests for procedures to donate funds to cover the student debt. If funds are donated, they need to include instructions in a note and/or on the memo line that says the purpose of the payment, the school or students for which it is intended, and that payment can be either sent to the child nutrition office payable to child nutrition or delivered to the individual school site payable to that school's cafeteria. If it's brought to the child nutrition office, we'll post the check to the school's bad debt account, and then if it's brought to the cafeteria, then they'll have to call us to do that. They don't have access to that account in the cafeteria, but it's no problem for us to do that. And then school administrators will be notified that that donation was made, and they can determine which accounts will be paid with the funds unless specific students were identified by the donor.
thing. I'd like to just make a comment about donated funds that I didn't realize as a principal. At the beginning of the year, I had a community member call wanting to donate funds because a student lunch was set aside and he didn't eat that day. It was at the beginning of the year. I knew that that student had traditionally been on free and reduced lunch, and so I said, let me check into things. The student was approved for free lunch, but because he didn't get the required components on the tray didn't qualify for free lunch.
Really?
So you could get just the piece of pizza. That is not considered a free lunch. That is just one thing, and you're required to pay for it. So one of the pieces that really helped us was making sure that all of our cafeteria staff knew, and I announced to my kids over and over, that in order to qualify for your free or reduced lunch, take the whole tray, because otherwise you can't, I mean, I
Yeah.
know that's wasteful to
Yeah.
some extent, but
Very
it
wasteful.
doesn't
Yeah.
qualify them.
They don't have to
Otherwise,
take.
they have to pay.
Yeah, they
Give
don't
it to a
actually
friend.
have to take the whole tray, but it does, the federal requirements are that it has to contain a fruit or a vegetable. And in most cases, they're told to go back and take, if they just got one fruit or one vegetable with that pizza, then they would be fine. And a lot of them just don't want to do that. And elementary and middle school, it's a little bit easier. They'll just go back and they'll do what they're told. High school, yeah, not so much.
But, you know, we didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that either.
And those
Yeah.
are federal requirements that need to be followed.
Right. And there are signs on the outside of all the cafeteria doors when you go in that says what it has to have to be a reimbursable lunch.
Well, and what happens if we don't meet the federal rules?
They can withhold our funds.
And they do.
Just
in
for
fact.
that
they
school
do.
or for the whole district?
It depends on what they see and if they feel it to be common at other schools.
Systemic, yeah.
You'll be subject to an audit,
Yes.
and you could be getting a long list of recommendations. It involves a lot of reporting and scrutiny from the state level, and they're serious about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have the report of how much food you have left at the end of the day?
Yes. Yeah, so we report what we have at the beginning, what we have at the end. Breakfast is particularly easy for them to come in and see whether every child has had it, because especially at the elementary and school and middle schools, even though they can take more than one fruit, most of them only take one fruit, and so you have to make sure you have served at least that much fruit as you have children. So it's very easy to track back and see if it's being done. Plus, they visually come to several schools and watch, and children tell the tale. You can tell when they're being told something different than what they do every day. Okay, so managing future student debt. Best practices in assisting with student debt is to actively encourage parents to apply for meal benefits if they believe that they qualify. And also to encourage parents to enroll in the K-12 payment center so that they can check their student balances regularly and set up those low balance notifications.
It's been amazingly thorough.
So I understand completely. So let's just say a seventh grader, all through his seventh grade and eighth grade year, runs up debt because they're being fed. And his middle school is going to cover that by taking money out of the school's general fund, I'm guessing, and repaying the child nutrition services. So then in 11th grade, when he wants to go to the prom, the high school makes good on, are you going back and looking at debt from 7th and 8th grade as well as 9th and 10th and 11th? So then what happens to that money when it's collected? Some of it goes to child nutrition, I'm sure, to make it, to pay off debt. But since the 7th and 8th grade monies have already been paid off by a school, they don't get reimbursed then of part of this money.
At the end of the year, do the schools not clear out when they send a check? Because I know
Right.
the check that I had to send a few years back, once you send to child nutrition, I owed $5,200, then every child nutrition charge for that year on my power school is cleared out. Our
Right.
bookkeeper takes that out, so it's not
Oh,
gonna move
okay.
forward. So once they've paid for it, that's not gonna move forward to 9th grade if it's paid for.
Okay.
Only things that move forward for the SOY start of the year are things that are less than paid.
Gotcha. What about fees that they never paid in 7th or 8th grade? Do those go forward?
Yeah, that would be under the middle school SOY. So you have to, for instance, when we did freshman orientation, we would have to call over to the middle schools so they could explain to us what was involved in that child's SOY. So we would know specifically what to tell the parents because the fee gets grouped into that line item.
Okay, so when you're collecting in 11th grade, the school's already had to pay off their 9th and 10th grade years, correct? How do you keep up with the tab that they've run? Because at the end of their 9th grade year, y'all have paid it off. At the end of 10th grade year, you've paid it off. So
That's
when,
what I was saying before, you basically lose it. It
Okay.
just comes from the general fund. And that's really a hard process to try to,
Keep up with.
if you let them charge, the school's gonna write a check at the end of the year for the general fund, and that's basically it.
And that general
Clear.
fund is used otherwise for what purposes?
The general fund is used for things such as lawn mowers, any extra expenses that have to be incurred in custodial supplies that we go over in, lots of things.
Paper.
Paper.
supplementary books sometimes, or, yeah.
Materials. So basically, if we're writing a check for $4,000, those are things that could be purchased for student use or school use that don't have funds.
And that's happening at every school through the whole county, no matter what grades.
And it used to be that we had the ability to create a general fund. With Smart Snack regulations, we can't run afternoon break the way that we used to be able to kind of generate a general fund. So we don't, there's not really a building general fund like we used to have.
And Smart Snack is a federal regulation
It is.
that you have to follow
It is.
as well.
Correct.
So that
Yes.
you cannot make extra money off selling M&Ms or potato
Right.
chips at the end of the day.
Honestly, the child nutrition program brought in more money before Smart Snacks also, which could be used for a lot of things. So it has changed a lot of things in a lot of ways.
Very thorough.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you, principals, for all that you do.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know you're really trying to do a lot of one-on-one with the students, and I appreciate that. And it sounds like, from what you were saying, Ms. Purvis, and the others, that those that fall through the cracks, you're finding them, you're looking for them, but trying to get them to fill out the form if they're eligible, and if they're not, sounds like you're making,
All three high schools have a field tree and have social workers who are really great to help.
making those connections. Yeah. And thank you, Ms. Lovelady. That was very
Very
thorough. Very appreciated, very much, very informative, and I know that this is going to be very helpful as we go out and talk to folks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Andy, thanks for coming too. We heard you were in court, so.
Say that again.
Who's gonna pay that speeding ticket?
That's right.
It's on Thursdays.
That's on Thursdays. Oh, Ed, you know that.
All right, it's time for us to wrap up. Any comments? Any board comments? Who wants to start? Mr. Grimm.
I'm looking forward to Phase 2 of redistricting. I think Phase 1 worked out very well, and with the help that we have from numerics and the input that the administration will get, I think we'll have a equally successful redistricting of whatever we redistrict.
Dr. Brown?
I have several things. I want to thank the schools for inviting us to come and read World Reading Day on the 1st of February. I'm just sorry I couldn't get to all the schools I wanted to get to. But we had lots of good participation in the schools, so that was really good. I also appreciate the updates that we're getting on the plays and the chorus things that are coming up, that they're being put on our calendar. Thank you, Ms. Sonia, and the schools that are letting her know so we can get those put on there so we can make plans for attending. And also, I want to thank all those who attended the African American Advisory Committee meeting last week who offered suggestions and inputs. It was informative and gave us a lot of information to think about.
No comment.
I want to just thank Dr. Bob and John for their time on a Saturday morning to give us a tour of the new McDiggs Creek School. It's beautiful, huge, very cold morning, but it's just, it's beautiful. And the thought and the planning that has gone into trying to ensure that we have what we need for our students and our faculty has just been truly amazing. And I just want to just appreciate you, Dr. Bob and John, for your time on a Saturday morning.
I wanted to mention, too, about the reading day on Friday. I had a wonderful time at Westmore. The fifth graders wanted me to do a shout out for them because they knew I was going to be on today. So I just wanted to say hi. Miss Potter, what was the teacher's name? I'm sorry. Renee Robbins. Yeah, Renee Robbins. She is wonderful. Is she really? Oh, that's right. That's right. I guess that wasn't supposed to be announced. But anyhow, they were just a wonderful class. And it was so cool to see because I've never taught like 7th grade or 8th grade. To go in there and act like a first grade teacher, as I am. The 5th graders loved it; they didn't care. But those 7th graders, they didn't give me any reaction, nothing. It was like I was in a comedy show and I was the worst comedian ever. So it really put my teaching skills to the test there. But I enjoyed it. It opened my eyes up. So I just want to say thank you to them.
You know, despite the fact that there's so many wonderful things going on with redistricting, naming new schools, getting to go read. I convinced a group of first grade boys they wanted to read Pride and Prejudice. I assured them that their senior years they would get that opportunity. But just a reminder that it's also budget time and time for us to look very carefully at what our priorities are, for our parents to look at what their priorities are, what they want to see the schools doing, what direction they want to see us going, and to speak up now, to be heard here, and with our county commissioners to see if they can't begin to make a difference.
I'll just say ditto to that. And, you know, we're focusing so much on building these new schools and fixing the fact that, you know, the can had been kicked down the road for so long, but, you know, also operationally, there's a lot of things that we've deferred over time and we've had to cut that we need to look at. So I appreciate you saying that, Ms. Carter, and that we need to think about our priorities and to really refocus on what those are going to be when we come together next Monday. The other thing I want to do is just thank all the staff that showed up at West Pine Middle on Saturday. It was, I know that was not a great event for us to have one of our buildings gone, but I will say I have this picture in my mind, Dr. Grimacy, of our 2 SROs, Schamberger and Hardy, Officer Schamberger and Hardy, with some of our maintenance professionals there. I know Bradley Garner was there, Todd Moore, Matthew Sewell, and Jeff Robbins. And it was, you know, they were putting the stakes in, putting up the wire around the building, and just all working together just to see the maintenance staff and the SROs together, you know, quickly putting this the school back together again, or at least that area, so that it would be safe for kids. And it was just such great teamwork. Security, thank you. Securing it.
Yeah.
Whatever the right words are, securing it for our kids. And it just made me think about the teamwork in our schools and how everybody is all hands in to do whatever needs to get done. And I just appreciated that. And I'm thankful that it wasn't a teacher's classroom, like a full-time classroom. It was a pull-out classroom. But we need to look at all those modulars, folks. We've got a lot of them around this county. And we really need to think about next steps on that, too. So keep that in the back of your mind. But thank you for all who put in their efforts on Saturday to make it more secure.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes, you may.
I do want to compliment Ms. Laura May and Ms. Catherine Murphy. They've worked very diligently after the fact on your all-day budget work session on January 22nd. We went through the entire day, and because of the length of the day, we made the mistake of thinking that the public would not want to watch a 6-hour-long video. But the disadvantage with that was that we forgot that many of our very interested parents will fast forward. Nobody sits and watches the whole thing, but they fast forward to those points that they're interested in. And so after the fact, we'd had some feedback that it was regrettable that people couldn't go and find some of the information that provided justification for the costs that the board was considering in putting together its budget. So Laura May and Catherine Murphy organized late last week an intensive process of bringing in staff who had given presentations to you on January 22nd. They repeated their presentations for Laura and Catherine too, but Laura really did a lot of the heavy lifting on this. And so we're going to be rolling out links on your meeting website where the video would have been. There'll be some opportunities there for individuals to view, break up the day. Each presentation will be its own link, sort of like a little podcast, and that's coming. If you don't mind, just letting you know, sometimes we'll be rolling that out very soon. And so you'll be discussing your budget priorities next week, but just as a little bit of a teaser for you all, we want to let you know that that's coming. And I want to thank them because that was a very time-intensive process that demonstrates the importance of what these ladies do for not only for this board, but also for the public.
That'll be very helpful. Thank you. And we all have homework next week. We all have to come prepared to discuss and talk about the priorities as we see them. So,
I think we're supposed to respond by the 7th.
well, but we'll have a discussion on Monday. Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, any motion to adjourn?
No, you go ahead.
Move the meeting, be adjourned.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Meeting adjourned.